Tonight you are about to step into a forgotten world long before civilization where every night could be your last. The stars above you look strangely familiar. Even though you have travelled farther into the past than the human mind can easily imagine, the constellations still scatter across the heavens with a comforting glow. They shine over a world almost impossible to recognise, yet somehow deeply connected to your own. There are no cities below them, no roads, no campfires built by human hands, only endless wilderness stretching beyond every horizon. Have you ever wondered what Earth looked like before dinosaurs ruled the land, or before the first bird sang at sunrise? Tonight you will wander through a planet so ancient that even the word ancient hardly seems large enough. It is a place filled with towering forests, enormous insects, unfamiliar reptiles, and oceans crowded with the creatures unlike anything swimming today. It feels peaceful, at least for now, because hidden beneath your feet something has already begun. Long before anyone could witness it, before mammals became common, before flowers bloomed, before the first human dreamed beneath a night sky, the greatest catastrophe in Earth's history quietly prepared itself beneath an ordinary evening. Before we step deeper into the darkness of tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more calming historical journeys. And while you're settling in, tell me your location and your local time in the comments below. It is always wonderful to see where these quiet journeys through history reach around the world. Now dim the lights, and allow yourself to take one slow step backward through unimaginably deep time. The air feels different immediately. It's warmer than you expected, carrying the rich scent of damp soil, pine-like trees, and enormous fern forests. A faint sweetness drifts from strange seed-bearing plants whose descendants will never survive into your own age. The breeze brushes gently across your skin, carrying tiny grains of dust and the distant smell of fresh rain. Somewhere nearby, insects hum steadily. Their rhythm fills the evening like soft music. You pause beside a shallow river winding across a broad plain. Moonlight reflects from its surface, turning every ripple into polished silver. Along the muddy banks stand tall horsetails nearly twice your height, their segmented stems swaying quietly with the breeze. Everything seems remarkably peaceful. That is one of history's favourite disguises. The year is roughly 252 million years before your own lifetime, near the end of what geologists call the Permian period. Earth has already lived through countless transformations. Mountains have risen and disappeared. Oceans have opened and closed. Entire groups of animals have evolved, flourished, and quietly vanished. Yet life has never been richer. Scientists estimate that nearly 90% of all known species live across the planet during this remarkable era. Vast forests stretch across continents. Coral reefs flourish beneath warm seas. Giant amphibians lurk in freshwater marshes. Strange reptiles roam dry valleys where no human footprint will ever appear. It almost resembles a paradise. Almost. A soft rustling emerges from nearby shrubs. Out steps a broad, sturdy animal about the size of a large pig. Its body is thick and muscular. Its legs spread slightly outward instead of directly beneath its body. Most remarkable is its head ending in two impressive tusks that curve gently downward. You are looking at a Dicynodon. Although its name sounds intimidating, this plant-eating creature spends most of its evenings searching patiently for root stems and soft vegetation. Millions of them wander across this ancient world, making them among the most successful large herbivores of their time. It sniffs the air cautiously, not because of you, because survival always demands attention. Farther away, another silhouette moves between the trees. This one walks more gracefully, balancing on stronger limbs while scanning the darkness with alert eyes. It belongs to a group known as Gorgonopsians, formidable predators equipped with long saber-like canine teeth. Fortunately for you tonight, it appears more interested in distant prey. You quietly continue walking. The forest floor feels soft beneath your feet, layered with fallen needles, damp moss, and decaying leaves. Every step releases earthy aromas that have accumulated over centuries. Mushrooms push through rotting logs. Tiny insects disappear beneath bark. Somewhere overhead, winged creatures glide between branches, though they are not birds. Birds do not yet exist, not even close. The silence between distant calls feels almost comforting. Modern forests often echo with familiar sounds, songbirds greeting sunrise, frogs croaking after rain, mammals moving through undergrowth. Here the orchestra follows entirely different rules. Strange reptiles produce low vibrating calls. Giant insects buzz with surprisingly deep tones. Amphibians splash quietly along muddy pools. Everything feels unfamiliar, yet strangely alive. One curious detail often surprises visitors to this period, at least imaginary visitors like yourself. The nights may actually have been louder than many modern forests. Without birds dominating daytime soundscapes, numerous insects and amphibians likely filled the darkness with continuous choruses that shifted as temperatures changed. Paleontologists cannot reconstruct every sound, but fossil anatomy suggests many animals communicated using vibrations, low-frequency calls, or body movements instead of melodic songs. The exact soundtrack remains uncertain. Researchers continue debating how noisy late Permian ecosystems truly became after sunset because soft tissues responsible for vocalization rarely fossilize. That uncertainty leaves room for imagination. You hear wind moving through towering conifers whose ancestors belong to families almost entirely extinct today. Their needles release aromatic oils that perfume the evening air with sharp, resinous notes. It smells comforting, almost festive. Yet hidden within this peaceful landscape are vulnerabilities invisible to every creature around you. The continents of Earth have gathered into one immense supercontinent called Pangaea. From where you stand, enormous distances stretch without interruption by today's familiar oceans. Animals can migrate across territories that in your own era would belong to several different continents. It is an extraordinary world. Its scale almost defies imagination. A journey beginning here could eventually reach lands that future humans would call North America, Europe, Africa, or Asia without crossing the Atlantic Ocean because it does not yet exist. The land itself feels endless. That enormous connected landscape shapes climate in surprising ways. Inland regions become extremely dry because moisture struggles to travel so far from coastal seas. Seasonal temperatures vary dramatically across different parts of the continent. Some valleys flourish, others quietly wither. Historians, of course, never witnessed these landscapes firsthand. Instead, geologists, paleobotanists, and paleoclimatologists patiently reconstruct them using fossil pollen, ancient soils, volcanic minerals, and chemical clues preserved inside rocks. Each discovery adds another brushstroke to a painting still missing many pieces. Some scientists even continue discussing whether certain inland deserts were larger than current climate models suggest. The evidence keeps evolving. Deep beneath your feet, however, something far larger than shifting deserts is already beginning. You cannot hear it. No animal can. Far below Earth's crust, enormous reservoirs of molten rock slowly gather beneath what future generations will know as Siberia. Pressure builds over thousands of years with unimaginable patience. Nothing seems unusual above ground. The Dicynodont continues grazing peacefully. Predators continue hunting. Forests continue growing. Rivers continue flowing beneath moonlight. Nature often whispers before it shouts. You kneel beside the quiet river once more. The cool water slips gently across your fingers. Small insects skim its surface without concern. A gentle breeze brushes past your face, carrying the scent of distant trees and damp stone. The planet feels completely alive. You breathe deeply. So does Earth, for now, because the peaceful rhythm surrounding you is only the opening breath before one of the greatest turning points in the history of life itself. Long before humanity learned to write stories, long before the first dinosaur placed a footprint into soft mud, this living world stood unknowingly at the edge of a transformation so vast that even today scientists still call it simply the Great Dying. And tonight you have arrived just before the first page begins to turn. Section 2. Morning never arrives all at once in the late Permian world. Instead, darkness loosens its grip little by little, allowing a cool grey light to spread gently across the horizon. Mist hangs above winding rivers, drifting lazily between ancient trees, whose ancestors will disappear millions of years before the first oak or maple ever grows. Tiny beads of moisture cling to broad fern leaves, catching the first hints of dawn like scattered glass. The forest wakes slowly. A low buzzing begins somewhere overhead. Insects stir beneath fallen branches. Far away, a heavy animal splashes through shallow water before disappearing into the morning fog. The air feels surprisingly fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with resin from towering conifers. You begin walking again. The landscape stretches so far that your eyes struggle to find an ending. Gentle hills rise toward distant mountains softened by a blue haze. Rivers weave across immense plains before vanishing into forests that seem endless. It feels almost limitless. That impression is no illusion. You are standing upon Pangaea, the greatest supercontinent Earth has ever assembled. Nearly every major landmass on the planet has collided into one enormous expanse stretching from polar regions to the equator. Today the continents seem comfortably separated. North America rests across the Atlantic from Europe. Africa lies beneath the Mediterranean. Australia drifts quietly in the southern hemisphere. None of that exists yet. Instead, everything is connected. You could begin walking from the forest surrounding you and continue for thousands upon thousands of kilometers without crossing an ocean that resembles the Atlantic. Mountains, deserts, floodplains, and forests merge into one astonishing continent that dominates the globe. It is a traveler's dream, and sometimes a survivor's nightmare, because size creates consequences. The farther inland you travel, the farther you move from the cooling influence of the sea. Coastal regions receive gentle breezes and regular rainfall, while the vast interior experiences fierce seasonal swings. Days become scorching, nights cool dramatically. Rain may fail to arrive for months before returning in sudden bursts. Some regions flourish, others simply endure. You notice the soil beneath your feet changing as you continue. Near the river, the ground remains soft and dark, packed with moisture that nourishes dense vegetation. But only a few hours' walk away, patches of cracked earth begin appearing between clusters of hardy plants adapted to longer dry spells. Even here, nature is negotiating with climate. Scientists understand much of this remarkable geography through an unexpected source: ancient pollen. Grains smaller than a speck of dust become trapped inside layers of mud lake sediments and peat deposits. Over hundreds of millions of years, those tiny grains fossilize, preserving evidence of forests that vanished long before mammals evolved. It is one of paleontology's quiet miracles. An entire woodland can leave behind almost nothing except microscopic pollen, yet that is often enough to reconstruct forgotten ecosystems. Researchers continue refining exactly how rainfall shifted across different regions of Pangaea, because the evidence sometimes tells slightly different stories depending upon where the fossils are found. The puzzle remains incomplete. That uncertainty is part of the adventure. As you leave the river behind, the vegetation grows more open. Tall conifers stand farther apart, allowing broad sunlight to warm the ground between them. Strange seed ferns spread their thick leaves beneath scattered trees. Massive horsetails rise beside seasonal streams like giant green columns. Nothing resembles a modern flower. Flowers have not yet evolved. There are no colourful meadows buzzing with bees, no roses, no tulips, no daisies opening beneath the morning sun. Instead, reproduction depends upon cones, spores, seeds, and ancient strategies perfected long before petals ever appeared. The world feels quieter because of it. Not silent, simply different. A movement catches your attention. Several sturdy dicynodonts emerge from the trees, walking together with calm confidence. Young animals remain close to large adults while slowly feeding on low vegetation. Their broad beaks clip stems efficiently before powerful jaws grind tough plant fibers. Their pace never seems hurried. Why waste precious energy? Food exists almost everywhere. This relaxed behavior reflects an important reality of the late Permian. Many herbivores spend much of their lives following seasonal vegetation across broad landscapes rather than constantly fleeing predators. Predators certainly exist, but they cannot hunt successfully every hour. The balance of nature still holds. Another remarkable creature appears. Its body stands lower than modern mammals, yet its posture feels surprisingly familiar. Strong limbs support a thick torso. Curious eyes scan the landscape with quiet intelligence. This animal belongs to a lineage called therapsids. Although it is not your ancestor directly, it belongs to a broader family whose distant descendants will eventually include mammals, and after an unimaginably long chain of generations that connection feels strangely personal. You are watching an ancient relative, not a grandparent, more like an impossibly distant cousin separated by 250 million years. Some paleontologists believe certain therapsids may already have possessed features hinting at faster metabolisms than earlier reptiles, although researchers still debate exactly how warm-blooded many of these animals truly became. The fossils leave room for discussion. Bones tell remarkable stories. They rarely tell every story. The sun climbs higher. Warm air begins replacing the cool freshness of dawn. A pleasant breeze ripples through conifer branches overhead, carrying the resinous fragrance of sap warmed by sunlight. Somewhere nearby, insects produce rhythmic clicking sounds that blend into a continuous natural chorus. You pause beneath a towering tree. Its bark feels rough beneath your fingertips. Sticky resin clings gently to your skin, releasing a sharp pine-like aroma that remains surprisingly familiar despite the unimaginable gulf of time separating this forest from your own world. Some scents never really disappear. They simply evolve. Looking toward the distant horizon, you notice something remarkable. There are mountains, many mountains. Some rise as worn ridges shaped by ancient erosion. Others still stand tall, their slopes catching bright morning light beneath a sky almost free of pollution or haze. The atmosphere appears wonderfully clear, yet appearances can deceive. Far beyond those distant horizons, beneath regions you cannot possibly reach today, forces are quietly rearranging Earth's future. Deep underground molten rock continues gathering. Pressure increases. Heat accumulates. The crust slowly stretches. Nothing on the surface seems alarming. Bird-like insects continue flying between branches. Amphibians bask beside streams. Herbivores graze peacefully across open meadows. The planet looks perfectly healthy. Earth often changes very slowly, until suddenly it does not. One curious idea has fascinated both scientists and storytellers alike. If you could stand high above the planet during this age, looking down from space, Pangaea might resemble a giant letter C wrapped around the immense Panthalassa ocean that covered most of Earth's surface. The shape is not perfectly agreed upon. Different reconstructions vary slightly as new geological evidence emerges. Even so, the image helps explain why climate behaves so differently from today. One enormous continent, one vast global ocean, countless interconnected ecosystem. Every change in one region could eventually ripple across thousands of kilometers. Life has become astonishingly successful because of these connections. Ironically, those same connections will soon allow catastrophe to spread farther than any creature could ever escape. You continue your quiet walk. The afternoon breeze grows warmer. Leaves rustle gently overhead. Small insects drift lazily through shafts of sunlight. Somewhere beyond the trees, a predator calls once before falling silent again. Nothing feels urgent. Nothing feels doomed. The animals around you cannot imagine extinction on a planetary scale. How could they? Their parents survived. Their grandparents survived. Generation after generation has followed familiar seasons beneath these same stars. Tomorrow should resemble yesterday. That comforting assumption belongs to every age, including our own. You stop upon a rocky ridge overlooking the endless forests of Pangaea. From here, the continent stretches beyond the limits of sight, peaceful beneath the bright Permian sky. You take one slow breath. The earth breathes with you. Deep below that calm landscape, however, another breath is quietly building. One that will not remain hidden forever. Section 3. The afternoon passes with unhurried confidence. Golden sunlight washes across the forests of Pangaea, warming broad river valleys and rocky hillsides that have known countless peaceful seasons. The breeze remains gentle, carrying the comforting fragrance of resin-damp moss and warm stone. Somewhere nearby, insects continue their steady chorus, while distant herbivores move slowly between patches of fresh vegetation. Nothing appears unusual. Nature has perfected the art of looking ordinary. You climb a low ridge overlooking a wide valley. From here, the landscape seems endless. Rivers wind like silver ribbons through forests of ancient conifers and seed ferns. Beyond them, hazy mountains rise beneath an open blue sky so clear that the horizon almost disappears into the distance. The planet feels remarkably alive. It's easy to believe that it will remain this way forever. Most living creatures probably did. After all, life has already survived hundreds of millions of years. Entire groups of animals have appeared, flourished, and faded away. Forests have spread across continents. Oceans have filled with reefs and strange swimming creatures. The rhythm of Earth seems dependable, steady, enduring. Yet deep beneath the northern reaches of this immense supercontinent, beyond every forest and mountain, you can see another rhythm quietly begins. It is slower, far slower. It unfolds over thousands of years instead of days. Hidden beneath what future humans will call Siberia, enormous chambers of molten rock continue gathering inside Earth's mantle. Temperatures climb, pressure increases, ancient rocks bend almost imperceptibly under forces too vast for any living creature to notice. The ground above remains still. Even the smallest insect feels a thing. You certainly would not suspect that one of the greatest geological events in Earth's history is quietly preparing itself beneath your feet. That's the strange nature of deep time. Disasters measured across millennia rarely announce themselves with dramatic beginnings. Instead, they whisper. You continue your walk as evening approaches. The sunlight softens into warmer shades of amber. Long shadows stretch across open grasslands, where broad-bodied dicynodonts continue feeding with patient determination. Young animals remain close together, while older individuals pause occasionally to lift their heavy heads and scan the horizon. Life continues as usual. Predators remain patient as well. Far across the valley, a gorgonopsian emerges from the edge of the forest. Its powerful shoulders roll smoothly beneath thick skin as it watches a distant herd. The animal does not charge. There is no need. Energy is precious. Every successful hunter understands that waiting often produces better results than rushing. You watch the predator disappear once more into the trees. Its quiet confidence reflects a stable ecosystem built over millions of years. Every species understands its place. Every season follows familiar patterns, at least on the surface. Beneath northern Pangaea, however, the crust has begun stretching under relentless pressure. Molten rock searches patiently for weakness, forcing its way upward through fractures invisible from above. The process resembles water soaking slowly through tiny cracks in old stone, only unimaginably hotter. Scientists now know that this rising magma eventually produced the Siberian Traps, one of the largest volcanic provinces Earth has ever known. The name Traps comes from the Swedish word trappa, meaning staircase, because layers of hardened lava create broad stepped landscapes that remain visible today. The scale is almost impossible to picture. If spread across the modern United States, these lava flows would cover enormous regions beneath kilometers of volcanic rock. Some estimates suggest the eruptions eventually buried more than 2 million square kilometers. Others propose even greater volumes. Researchers continue refining those numbers as new geological surveys improve our understanding of ancient lava fields. Even today, the exact total remains surprisingly difficult to calculate. The Earth rarely leaves perfect records. You kneel beside a shallow stream. Cold water slips gently over smooth stones polished by countless seasons. Tiny aquatic creatures dart beneath floating leaves. Dragonfly-like insects skim the surface before vanishing into reeds that sway quietly in the evening breeze. Everything feels balanced. The scent of wet soil fills the air. Nearby, one fallen tree slowly returns to the earth as fungi and insects quietly recycle its wood. Another sapling grows through a narrow gap in the canopy, reaching patiently towards sunlight. Life wastes nothing. Every ending feeds another beginning. That rhythm has governed this world for millions of years. It is precisely why what comes next will prove so astonishing. The volcanic activity beginning beneath Siberia does not resemble a single dramatic eruption like Mount Vesuvius or Mount St. Helens. Instead, imagine thousands, then imagine tens of thousands, not over weeks. Over hundreds of thousands of years, lava pours from immense cracks rather than neat volcanic cones. Rivers of molten rock spread across the landscape, cooling only to be buried beneath newer flows. Again and again the crust opens. Again and again the earth bleeds fire. Some individual lava sheets may have travelled astonishing distances before solidifying, creating vast plains of black basalt that stretched farther than the eye could see. The eruptions become so persistent that generations of animals live and die while the volcanic fields continue expanding. To them, it is simply the way the distant north has always been. One curious possibility has fascinated geologists for decades. Some evidence suggests that rising magma may have encountered enormous underground deposits of coal oil and organic-rich sediments. As these materials heated, they likely released additional carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, greatly amplifying the volcanic impact. Exactly how much they contributed remains debated. The rocks tell an intriguing story. Not every page survives intact. The afternoon slowly fades toward evening. Clouds drift lazily across the western sky, glowing soft shades of gold and crimson. Warm wind brushes across your face, carrying faint aromas of flowering seed plants that belong to botanical families long vanished from Earth. The forest settles into its nightly rhythm. Small reptiles disappear beneath fallen logs. Amphibians emerge beside quiet ponds. Insects begin singing with renewed energy as temperatures cool. You notice how comfortable the world feels. It almost invites you to stay. Perhaps that is why imagining its disappearance feels so difficult. Mass extinction is often pictured as sudden chaos. Reality unfolds differently. Long before ecosystems collapse, there are years when almost everything still works. Forests continue growing. Rivers continue flowing. Animals continue raising young. The planet appears healthy even while invisible pressures quietly accumulate. Earth has experienced similar moments before, and it will again. You climb another rocky outcrop as twilight deepens. The stars begin appearing one by one above the ancient continent. Their pale light reflects across distant rivers and dark forests stretching beyond every horizon. Far away, hidden beneath thousands of meters of ancient rock, molten chambers continue expanding. No creature hears them. No creature fears them. Yet every heartbeat on this peaceful evening already belongs to a world whose future has begun changing forever. The first fractures have formed. The fire has awakened. Earth itself has started preparing to breathe in a completely different way. Section 4. Evening settles across the Permian world with familiar grace. The last light of the sun slips behind distant hills, painting the horizon with soft ribbons of amber rose and deep violet. Long shadows stretch across forests that have stood for countless generations. Rivers mirror the fading sky, while a gentle breeze stirs the needle-covered branches of ancient conifers. Everything follows its usual rhythm. At least here, you stand upon a rocky overlook as darkness slowly gathers beneath the trees. The air feels pleasantly cool against your skin after the warmth of the afternoon. Resin perfumes the breeze. Damp soil releases its earthy fragrance as tiny insects begin their nightly chorus. It's almost hypnotic. The world seems determined to convince you that tomorrow will arrive exactly as yesterday did. Far beyond the northern horizon, however, tomorrow has already begun changing. Deep beneath the land that future generations will know as Siberia, immense reservoirs of magma have continued their patient ascent. Pressure has increased for thousands of years. Ancient rock layers have stretched almost beyond their limits. Now they begin to fail, not with one tremendous explosion, with thousands of quiet fractures. Imagine placing your hand upon an old loaf of bread fresh from the oven. As it cools, tiny cracks appear across its surface. Each crack seems insignificant by itself, yet together they reveal tremendous forces at work beneath the crust. Earth behaves similarly, only on a scale that defies imagination. The first enormous fissures open across the landscape. They extend for kilometers. Some continue much farther. Instead of neat volcanic cones rising proudly above the countryside, lava erupts directly from these immense fractures pouring across the land like rivers of liquid sunlight. There is no single mountain. The ground itself has become the volcano. At first, the eruptions remain far from the forests surrounding you. Their distant glow barely stains the northern horizon with a faint reddish haze visible only after sunset. Many animals probably never notice. Others may simply mistake the glow for an unusually colourful evening. Nature rarely announces catastrophe with perfect clarity. The earliest warnings often resemble ordinary events. You continue walking through the quiet woodland. The forest floor cushions every step with layers of fallen needles and soft moss. Small amphibians emerge beside shallow pools, their damp skin glistening beneath moonlight. Somewhere overhead, enormous dragonfly-like insects drift silently between branches. Life continues. The calm feels almost reassuring. Yet the atmosphere itself has begun receiving invisible gifts from the earth below. Each eruption releases tremendous quantities of carbon dioxide. Water vapor rises alongside it. Sulfur dioxide joins the expanding plume. Other volcanic gases escape as well, spreading gradually into the atmosphere above Pangaea. No creature smells them from this distance. No creature understands their significance. Even today, many volcanic gases remain invisible despite their extraordinary influence upon climate. Scientists estimate that the Siberian eruptions eventually released astonishing amounts of greenhouse gases over hundreds of thousands of years. Some calculations suggest the carbon emissions exceeded anything produced during most other known volcanic episodes in Earth's history. The exact totals remain actively studied. Each new rock sample slightly improves the estimate. Each chemical signature offers another clue. You pause beside an ancient conifer whose trunk rises high above the surrounding undergrowth. Its bark feels deeply furrowed beneath your fingertips. Sticky resin glistens in narrow cracks where insects occasionally become trapped. Millions of years later, similar resin will harden into amber. Tiny creatures preserved inside will offer future scientists extraordinary glimpses into forgotten ecosystems. Even the smallest accident can become history. A soft wind rustles overhead. The branches sway gently. Nothing suggests the beginning of planetary upheaval. That contrast feels strangely unsettling. Human imagination often pictures disaster arriving with immediate drama. Reality prefers patience. The volcanic fields continue expanding. Fresh lava spreads across older flows before cooling into black basalt. New fissures open beside earlier ones. Molten rock forces itself upward again and again, building layer upon layer across enormous regions. One eruption ends, another quietly begins. This rhythm repeats countless times. If you could watch from high above, the glowing rivers of lava would resemble fiery veins slowly spreading beneath the skin of the continent. Some individual flows may have remained molten for astonishing distances, travelling across nearly level ground before finally cooling into solid stone. Others piled upon earlier layers, eventually creating basalt sequences several kilometers thick. That thickness still amazes geologists today. Few landscapes preserve volcanic history on such an immense scale. Historians cannot witness these eruptions directly. Instead, geologists read them through radiometric dating mineral crystals, magnetic signatures preserved inside cooling lava, and subtle chemical fingerprints locked within ancient rocks. Every basalt layer functions like another page in Earth's oldest diary. Some pages remain beautifully preserved, others have weathered beyond recognition. You leave the forest and step onto open grassland where the moon now rises above the eastern horizon. Silver light washes across grazing dicynodonts scattered peacefully across the plain. Young animals remain close beside adults, occasionally lifting their broad heads before returning to feed. Predators remain patient. Prey remains calm. The ancient balance still holds. Perhaps that is the most haunting part of this story. Extinction does not begin with empty landscapes. It begins while ordinary evenings continue unfolding exactly as expected. Generations are born. Generations grow old. Children become parents. Forests produce fresh seeds. Rivers flooded and retreat. Life continues carrying on its familiar routines, while enormous environmental changes slowly accumulate beyond immediate perception. You notice something curious. The stars appear slightly hazier toward the far northern horizon. Perhaps it is only thin cloud. Perhaps distant volcanic aerosols have already begun scattering faint traces of light across the upper atmosphere. Scientists continue discussing precisely how quickly volcanic emissions spread across the globe during the earliest phases of the eruptions. Atmospheric circulation models provide valuable clues. Different simulations sometimes reach different conclusions. The uncertainty remains part of the science. One remarkable idea has emerged from recent research. Some studies suggest that individual eruptive pulses may have lasted decades separated by quieter intervals before volcanic activity intensified again. If true, many animals would have experienced cycles of apparent recovery followed by renewed environmental stress. The Earth may not have changed steadily. It may have changed in waves. That possibility makes the coming catastrophe even more complex than once imagined. The breeze freshens. A faint scent of smoke reaches you, not from a nearby wildfire, from somewhere unimaginably distant. It is barely noticeable, so faint that another traveller might dismiss it entirely. Yet it reminds you of something important. Every enormous transformation begins with something almost too small to recognize. A single crack, a single plume, a single breath from deep within the earth. You sit upon a weathered stone overlooking the sleeping landscape. The forest hums quietly behind you. Insects continue singing. A distant amphibian splashes softly into dark water. The moon climbs higher. Everything feels peaceful. Everything feels wonderfully alive. Far beneath the northern crust, however, molten rock continues rising without pause. Fresh fissures continue opening. New rivers of lava continue spreading. Invisible gases continue entering the sky. The mountains are no longer simply standing beneath the stars. In their own ancient way, they have begun to breathe. Section 5. Night has fully settled across Pangaea. The moon hangs high above the vast supercontinent, bathing forests, rivers, and open plains in a pale silver light. Shadows stretch between towering conifers like long ribbons across the forest floor. Cool air slips gently through the branches, carrying the familiar scents of resin-damp bark and rich soil that has quietly nurtured life for millions of years. You breathe deeply. The air feels clean. It feels endless. Nothing about this peaceful evening suggests that the very atmosphere surrounding you has already begun changing. Not dramatically. Not yet. The transformation is almost impalpable. Possibly subtle. If you lived here as one of the animals wandering beneath these stars, you would never notice it from one season to the next. Even several generations might pass without recognizing that every breath had become just a little different from the last. That is how some of history's greatest changes unfold. Not as sudden shocks, as quiet accumulations. You leave the shelter of the forest and follow a winding river whose waters reflect the moon like polished metal. The current moves lazily around smooth stones, producing a gentle whisper that blends with the constant chorus of insects. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic. A family of dicynodonts sleeps nearby beneath scattered trees. Their breathing is slow and steady. Occasionally one shifts its heavy body before settling comfortably against the soft ground once again. Predators remain somewhere beyond the darkness. Tonight at least peace has prevailed. You continue walking until the eastern horizon begins showing the faintest hint of approaching dawn. The first cool breeze of morning brushes across your face. It carries something different. Not a smell, not a taste, simply a feeling that the air has become ever so slightly heavier. Of course, you cannot actually sense carbon dioxide. Neither can the animals surrounding you. Yet molecule by molecule, year after year, the atmosphere is beginning to change. Far to the north, the immense volcanic fields continue releasing staggering quantities of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide rises continuously from countless fissures drifting upward before spreading across the globe through powerful atmospheric circulation. The sky itself is quietly transforming. Most greenhouse gases are invisible. That makes them remarkably deceptive. You can watch a brilliant dinosaurs and holes. You can admire a cloudless afternoon. You can gaze upon dazzling stars. All while the atmosphere is changing in ways your eyes will never reveal. Modern scientists understand this process remarkably well, because the physics remain beautifully consistent across time. Carbon dioxide allows sunlight to enter Earth's atmosphere with relative ease. Some of that incoming energy warms the surface. The planet then releases heat back towards space as infrared radiation. Carbon dioxide absorbs part of that escaping heat, sending a portion back toward the surface instead of allowing it to disappear into space. The effect resembles adding another blanket during a cool night. One blanket feels comfortable. Add enough blankets, however, and the warmth becomes difficult to escape. Earth is slowly wrapping itself in invisible layers. The process unfolds over thousands of years. Still, it never truly pauses. You climb a gentle hillside overlooking broad valleys that stretch toward the horizon. Morning sunlight begins spilling across the landscape, painting the forest with soft golden light. Mist rises from wetlands where giant amphibians rest half-submerged beneath quiet water. Strange insects shimmer as their wings catch the first rays of dawn. Everything still appears healthy. That appearance is genuine. For now, plants continue growing vigorously because increased carbon dioxide can encourage photosynthesis under favorable conditions. Forests remain lush across many regions. Rivers continue nourishing wetlands. Herbivores find abundant food. Nature often responds with remarkable resilience. At first, researchers studying fossil plants have discovered intriguing evidence suggesting that some ancient forests initially expanded under rising carbon dioxide concentrations before later suffering from increasing heat and prolonged environmental stress. Exactly how different plant communities responded remains an active area of research. Some adapted surprisingly well, others declined much sooner than expected. The ancient forests did not all share the same fate. You notice droplets of dew sparkling upon broad fern leaves. Each tiny bead reflects the morning sky like a miniature mirror. A light breeze shakes the fronds, sending cool moisture onto your hands. The touch feels refreshing. Life still possesses extraordinary beauty. Nearby insects begin their daily work among towering horsetails. Small reptiles emerge from sheltered burrows warmed by the rising sun. A distant predator disappears silently into taller vegetation after an unsuccessful hunt. The rhythm continues, generation after generation. Yet above these familiar routines, Earth's atmosphere has begun collecting more than carbon dioxide alone. Sulfur dioxide also rises from the volcanic provinces. Unlike carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide behaves differently. When it reaches the upper atmosphere, it can combine with water vapor to form tiny sulfate particles that reflect portions of incoming sunlight. This creates an interesting paradox. Some volcanic eruptions temporarily cool the planet before greenhouse warming ultimately dominates over longer timescales. Scientists believe similar short-term fluctuations probably occurred during the Siberian eruptions. Exactly how these competing effects balance through time remains one of the most fascinating questions in paleoclimate research. Earth's climate rarely responds in simple ways. Multiple forces often act simultaneously. One curious piece of evidence comes from microscopic bubbles trapped inside ancient minerals. These tiny inclusions preserve samples of fluids and gases that existed hundreds of millions of years ago. By carefully analyzing them, researchers reconstruct temperatures, volcanic chemistry, and environmental conditions with astonishing precision. Imagine reading history from a bubble smaller than the tip of a needle. Nature keeps extraordinary records. Provided you know where to look, the sun climbs higher, warmth gradually replaces the pleasant coolness of dawn, the breeze loses some of its freshness. Leaves hanging from nearby seed ferns seem slightly less vibrant than those growing beside cooler streams. Perhaps it is nothing, perhaps local weather alone, or perhaps tiny environmental shifts have already begun influencing the most sensitive corners of this vast ecosystem. No single animal notices. Why would they? Each day still resembles the last. Each season still follows familiar rhythm. The difference lies not in today's weather. It lies in tomorrow's trend, and the next 1,000 tomorrows or after that. You pause beside a shallow pond where smooth water reflects drifting clouds overhead. Dragonfly-like insects skim the surface with astonishing grace. Beneath them, primitive amphibians wait patiently for passing prey. The pond appears timeless, yet even quiet waters faithfully record changes occurring in the atmosphere. Warmer temperatures gradually alter evaporation. Rainfall slowly shifts. Streams carry different sediments. Lakes deepen or shrink. Every ecosystem responds in its own way. Some changes happen so gradually that entire generations live without realizing they are witnessing history. A gentle wind returns. It rustles through the conifer branches above you with a soft whisper remarkably similar to forest today. For one peaceful moment, you could almost forget that you're standing 252 million years in the past. Then you remember. Far beyond, the northern horizon rivers of lava continue flowing across the land. Invisible gases continue rising into the sky. The atmosphere continues thickening one molecule at a time. The Earth still breathes, but each quiet breath now carries a little more warmth than the one before. Section 6. Morning has given way to another long afternoon. The sun hangs high above the immense continent of Pangaea, pouring steady warmth across forests, broad flood plains, and distant mountain ranges that shimmer beneath a cloudless sky. The rivers still flow with quiet confidence. Ancient conifers sway gently in a warm breeze, their resin filling the air with a sharp, comforting fragrance that feels strangely familiar despite the unimaginable distance in time. You wipe a thin layer of sweat from your forehead. The warmth is noticeable, not unbearable, just enough to make you pause in the shade a little longer than before. That is how great climate shifts often begin, not with unbearable heat, with small adjustments that slowly become the new normal. A broad river winds through the valley below its banks, crowded with giant horsetails and dense stands of seed ferns. Several dicynodonts stand knee-deep in the cool water, drinking slowly before settling beneath nearby trees, where the afternoon shade offers welcome relief. They are behaving exactly as they should. Animals have always understood one simple truth. When the day grows hotter, seek water, seek shade, conserve energy. You settle beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient conifer. The bark presses roughly against your back while cool shadows soften the afternoon sun. A gentle breeze brushes across your face, carrying the scent of damp moss mixed with warm pine resin. For a moment, everything feels wonderfully peaceful. Above you, insects drift lazily through shafts of golden light. Nearby, a small reptile disappears beneath a fallen log. Farther away, an amphibian slips quietly into a shaded pool. The forest still breathes, yet its rhythm has become ever so slightly slower. Far to the north, beyond every horizon, you can imagine the Siberian traps continue erupting with astonishing persistence. Fresh lava pours from immense fissures across the landscape. Thick clouds of volcanic gases rise skyward before joining the atmosphere that now wraps around the entire planet. The eruptions have not ended. They have become part of Earth's daily routine. Generation after generation is born beneath skies quietly changing overhead. No living creature understands why. One remarkable aspect of this ancient catastrophe is its patience. The Great Dying was not caused by one terrible afternoon, nor by one devastating year. Instead, environmental stress accumulated, gradually allowing ecosystems to absorb change for a time before finally reaching their limits. Nature is remarkably resilient. It simply cannot endure everything forever. As centuries pass into millennia, average global temperatures continue climbing. The increase is measured not in sudden leaps, but in slow, relentless steps. 1 degree, then another, eventually several more. Modern climate reconstruction suggests that average global temperatures may have risen by as much as 8 to 10 degrees Celsius during the height of the crisis, although researchers continue refining those estimates using increasingly sophisticated techniques. Even the lower estimates describe an extraordinary transformation. The Earth develops a fever, not for days, for thousands of years. You resume your walk as the afternoon grows warmer. The ground beneath your feet feels noticeably drier than it did earlier in your journey. Small cracks appear in patches of exposed soil between clusters of hardy vegetation. Some shallow pools have shrunk slightly, leaving muddy edges where insects gather in buzzing clouds. The changes remain subtle. Most travelers would overlook them, but nature notices everything. A herd of dicynodonts has adjusted its routine. Rather than feeding continuously beneath the open sun, the animals now spend longer resting during the hottest hours before returning to forage as evening approaches. Their instincts guide them well. Behavior often adapts long before bodies can evolve. Nearby, another therapsid moves cautiously between scattered trees. It pauses frequently in shaded areas before continuing its search for food. Its breathing appears slightly faster than earlier. In the cool morning, heat demands energy. Cooling the body demands even more. Scientists studying fossilized bones have found evidence suggesting that some late Permian animals experience slower growth during periods of environmental stress, perhaps reflecting increasingly difficult living conditions. Exactly how widespread these effects became remains uncertain. Different species responded differently. Some adapted surprisingly well, others struggled much sooner. Evolution has never treated every creature equally. A warm wind sweeps across the valley. This time it carries less moisture. The rich scent of damp earth has faded, replaced by the dusty aroma of sun-baked soil and dry grasses. Leaves rustle more sharply overhead, sounding slightly brittle where they once whispered softly. You notice it immediately. The forest notices too. Water is beginning to work harder. Rain still falls. Rivers still flow. But evaporation now steals more moisture back into the warming atmosphere. Some wetlands shrink. Streams become increasingly seasonal. Lakes fluctuate more dramatically from year to year. None of these changes alone seem catastrophic. Together, they begin reshaping entire ecosystems. One fascinating clue comes from fossil soils preserved beneath ancient rock layers. These paleosols, as geologists call them, contain chemical signatures revealing how wet or dry the environment was when the soil originally formed. By comparing thousands of samples across different regions, researchers have reconstructed changing rainfall patterns throughout the late Permian. The evidence paints a complicated picture. Some regions became dramatically drier. Others experienced powerful seasonal storms separated by longer dry periods. Earth's climate was not changing uniformly. It was becoming less predictable. That uncertainty challenged every living thing. You climb another low ridge overlooking forests stretching toward the shimmering horizon. The afternoon air now trembles slightly above exposed rocks, creating gentle distortions that blur distant trees. Heat waves dance across the landscape like invisible currents flowing upward toward the sky. The effect feels strangely familiar. Modern travelers see the same shimmering air above hot highways and desert sands. Some experiences truly transcend time. A small group of gorgonopsians emerges cautiously from the woodland below. Instead of immediately beginning a hunt, they settle beneath scattered trees where shadows remain longest. Even apex predators must respect rising temperatures. Strength offers many advantages. It does not conquer heat. Researchers continue discussing whether increasingly stressful climates may have altered predator-prey relationships before the extinction reached its peak. If herbivores changed migration routes or feeding schedules, predators would inevitably need to adjust as well. Exactly how those behavioral changes unfolded remains impossible to observe directly. The fossils preserve outcomes. They rarely preserve daily routines. As evening finally approaches, the oppressive warmth begins relaxing its grip. Cooler air drifts slowly across the valley. The dicynodonts rise from their shaded resting places. Insects grow more active. The forest gradually awakens once again. Life continues adapting. One day at a time. One season at a time. Season at a time. That quiet resilience is perhaps the most inspiring part of this ancient story. The living world refuses to surrender easily. Every creature searches for shade. Every root reaches deeper for moisture. Every generation discovers new ways to survive changing conditions. For a while, those efforts are enough. You stop beside the river where your journey began several days ago. Its waters still sparkle beneath the evening light, yet the current seems ever so slightly lower than before. Perhaps it is only the season. Perhaps not. You kneel and let the cool water flow through your fingers. Its touch remains wonderfully refreshing. The breeze carries the scent of distant forests mixed with warm stone cooling beneath the fading sun. The earth still supports astonishing abundance. It still shelters magnificent forests. It still nourishes rivers full of life. Yet hidden within every warm afternoon is another quiet reminder. The fever has not broken. It is still rising. And the living world has only begun to discover how exhausting an endless summer can become. Section 7. Another evening arrives. The sun sinks slowly toward the western horizon, softening the fierce warmth that has lingered across the land throughout the day. Long beams of golden light stretch through the ancient forest, illuminating drifting clouds of insects that dance lazily above the undergrowth. The breeze has returned cooler than the afternoon, carrying the familiar scents of resin-dry grasses and the faint sweetness of ancient seed-bearing plants. You welcome the cooler air, so does every creature around you. The valley gradually comes alive again. Dicynodonts emerge from shaded groves to feed during the comfortable hours before darkness. Small therapsids cautiously search among fallen branches for insects and tender shoots. Somewhere beyond the trees, a distant predator announces its presence with a deep, resonant call that echoes briefly before fading into silence. The forest answers, not with fear. With routine, life still follows the patterns that have guided it for millions of years. Yet as you continue your quiet walk beneath towering conifers, something feels subtly different. It is not what you hear. It is what you do not. The chorus of insects remains steady, but there are fewer voices than before. The spaces between their calls seem slightly longer. The breeze moves through patches of woodland where the canopy has grown unexpectedly thin, allowing more evening sunlight to reach the forest floor. Nothing appears dramatic, just quiet. Nature rarely announces decline with a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it simply becomes less busy. Far to the north, the Siberian traps continue erupting with relentless determination. Vast sheets of lava spread across ancient landscapes while volcanic gases pour steadily into the atmosphere. The fever gripping the planet continues strengthening year after year. Forests are beginning to notice. Plants cannot migrate as quickly as animals. A herd may move toward cooler valleys within weeks. A forest must remain rooted exactly where it grows. That simple difference changes everything. You kneel beside a young seed fern whose broad leaves droop slightly despite standing near a small stream. The soil surrounding its roots feels drier than expected. Tiny cracks spread across patches of exposed earth where moisture once lingered comfortably through the season. The stream still flows, but not as generously. Yay. Scientists studying fossilized tree rings from the late Permian have discovered evidence suggesting that many ancient forests experienced increasingly difficult growing conditions as temperatures climbed and rainfall patterns shifted. Some rings become remarkably narrow, others disappear entirely. Trees keep diaries. They simply write them in wood. Not every forest suffers equally. Regions closer to reliable water sources remain relatively healthy. River valleys continue supporting dense vegetation while upland areas begin showing scattered patches of decline. Nature adapts unevenly. Some places endure, others quietly fade. You continue uphill toward a broad overlook where the forest stretches beneath the evening sky. From this height, subtle differences become easier to notice. Small openings have appeared within what was once an uninterrupted canopy. A few towering conifers stand leafless against the horizon, their bare branches reaching toward the fading light like silent monuments. They are not yet common, but they are no longer rare. One fallen giant lies across the forest floor below. Its trunk has begun decaying beneath colonies of fungi and countless insects. Even in death, it provides life. That has always been one of nature's greatest strengths. Nothing is wasted, yet the balance begins shifting when more trees die than new ones replace. Open ground warms faster beneath direct sunlight. Moisture evaporates more quickly. Young seedlings struggle beneath increasingly unpredictable weather. One change quietly encourages another. The forest enters a difficult conversation with the climate. A warm breeze carries the scent of dry needles instead of fresh greenery. It feels strangely familiar. Modern hikers often notice similar aromas during unusually hot summers in conifer forests. Heat concentrates the natural oils inside needles and bark, creating an intense resinous fragrance that lingers in still air. Across 252 million years, some sensations remain remarkably unchanged. A movement catches your attention. Several dicynodonts have altered their feeding route. Instead of entering the thinning woodland, they continue toward wetter lowlands where greener vegetation remains abundant. Instinct guides them well. Animals often recognize changing landscapes long before they understand why those changes occur. Migration routes slowly evolve. Feeding grounds gradually shift. Habit becomes adaptation. Researchers have found fossil evidence suggesting that some herbivorous populations became increasingly concentrated around reliable water sources during the later stages of the Permian. Exactly how widespread these migrations became remains uncertain. Fossil discoveries provide snapshots. The complete journey remains hidden. The fading sunlight paints the western sky brilliant shades of orange and crimson. Clouds drift slowly overhead. For a moment, the landscape appears almost impossibly beautiful. There is something deeply moving about beauty existing beside vulnerability. Neither one cancels the other. The earth is still magnificent. It is simply becoming more fragile. Another curious clue survives inside ancient rocks. Large quantities of fossil charcoal appear in sediments from certain regions, suggesting that wildfires became increasingly common as climates grew warmer and vegetation dried. Fire itself was nothing new. Forests had always burned occasionally, but hotter temperatures and prolonged dry periods may have allowed flames to spread farther and more frequently than before. Scientists continue debating exactly how important wildfire became during the Great Dying. Some believe it dramatically accelerated ecosystem collapse. Others argue it was primarily a consequence rather than a cause. Both ideas carry compelling evidence. The story remains unfinished. Night gradually returns. Stars emerge one by one above the darkening forest. The air finally cools enough for a pleasant breeze to sweep through the trees, carrying the comforting scent of fresh water from the nearby river. You pause beside its quiet bank. Moonlight reflects across gentle ripples while insects gather above the surface in shimmering clouds. The river remains alive. Its steady murmur offers reassurance. Yet even rivers cannot fully protect the forest surrounding them. As temperatures continue climbing, evaporation quietly steals more water into the atmosphere. Seasonal droughts grow longer. Heat places increasing stress upon trees already adapting to unfamiliar conditions. The changes remain almost invisible, until suddenly they are not. One remarkable feature of Earth's ecosystems is their ability to absorb disturbance. For years, sometimes centuries, a forest can lose individual trees while remaining healthy. It can survive droughts. It can recover from storms. But eventually there comes a threshold. Beyond that point, recovery becomes increasingly difficult. Scientists still debate exactly when many Permian forests crossed that threshold. Different regions almost certainly reached it at different times. Nature seldom obeys perfectly synchronized schedules. You rest your hand against another ancient conifer. Its bark feels warm from the day's lingering heat. The tree has survived countless seasons. It has endured storms, droughts, insects, and changing rivers. It cannot outrun the climate. Few living things can. The breeze grows quieter. The insect chorus softens. For the first time since your journey began, the silence between forest sounds lasts just a little longer. It is not an empty silence. Not yet, but it hints at something waiting beyond the horizon. The forests are still standing. Their roots still grip the earth. Their branches still reach toward the stars. Yet somewhere deep within this ancient world, the great green heartbeat of the Permian has begun to miss its first quiet beats. Section 8. Night lingers a little longer before dawn. The stars remain bright above the sleeping forests, their pale light reflected in rivers that wind quietly across the immense continent. A gentle breeze moves through the conifers, carrying the comforting fragrance of resin and damp stone. Somewhere nearby, insects continue their familiar chorus, though the melody feels thinner than it did when your journey first began. You notice the difference without trying. Silence has a way of introducing itself slowly. The eastern horizon gradually brightens. Soft ribbons of silver and pale blue replace the darkness. Mist rises from marshes and shallow lakes, drifting lazily across the water before dissolving beneath the first warmth of the morning. A small therapsid emerges from beneath tangled roots, pauses to sniff the cool air, and disappears into the undergrowth. Another ordinary day begins. For the creatures living here, nothing seems extraordinary. The sun still rises. The rivers still flow. The forests still stand. Yet beneath the calm surface of the world's oceans, another story has already begun. You leave the woodland behind and follow a broad river toward the distant coast. The journey takes hours, perhaps days, though. Time feels strangely different in this ancient landscape. Forests gradually give way to open wetlands where towering horsetails sway above shallow pools. The smell of fresh water slowly changes, blending with the faint tang of salt carried inland by a gentle breeze. Soon you hear waves, not crashing, breathing. The shoreline stretches endlessly before you, curving beneath a bright morning sky. The sea appears peaceful, its surface shimmering beneath the rising sun as gentle swells roll towards sandy beaches scattered with shells unlike any found today. Nothing looks unusual. That is the remarkable thing. The greatest changes often begin where human eyes would never notice. You step into the cool shallows. Clear water flows gently around your ankles, revealing small marine creatures moving across the sandy bottom. Primitive fish glide through patches of seaweed, while strange-shelled animals rest quietly among scattered stones. The ocean feels wonderfully alive. Its rhythm seems eternal, yet every wave carries invisible changes. Far to the north, volcanic gases continue pouring into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide concentrations keep rising, warming both land and sea. Oceans absorb much of that excess carbon dioxide directly from the air. They have always done so, even today. When carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater, it forms weak carbonic acid, subtly changing the chemistry of the oceans. Modern scientists call this process ocean acidification. The chemistry sounds complicated. Its consequences are not. Many marine organisms depend upon stable seawater chemistry to build shells and skeletons from calcium carbonate. As acidity increases, constructing those protective structures becomes progressively more difficult. Some adapt, some struggle, some quietly disappear. Researchers studying fossil reefs from the late Permian have discovered dramatic declines among many reef-building organisms during this period. Entire marine communities that had flourished for millions of years gradually weakened before eventually collapsing. Exactly how rapidly this happened remains an active area of scientific discussion. Some evidence suggests repeated setbacks. Other discoveries indicate longer periods of gradual decline. The sea still keeps some of its secrets. You continue walking along the shoreline. Warm sunlight sparkles across gentle waves. The salty breeze cools your skin while seabirds are noticeably absent. Because birds do not yet exist. Instead, large dragonfly-like insects drift above coastal vegetation, occasionally changing direction as warm air rises from sunlit rocks. Strange marine reptiles have not yet come to dominate these waters either. This is a different ocean, an older one, a quieter one. You kneel beside a shallow tidal pool. Tiny creatures cling to smooth stones beneath the clear water. Primitive mollusks move slowly across algae-covered surfaces, while delicate filter feeders extend feathery appendages into the gentle current. Life seems wonderfully abundant. Then you notice something curious. The water feels unusually warm, not unpleasant, simply warmer than a coastal sea should perhaps feel. Ocean temperatures rise more slowly than air temperatures because water stores enormous amounts of heat. That very strength becomes a weakness during prolonged warming. The sea remembers. Once warmed, it releases heat only gradually. As centuries become millennia, Earth's oceans steadily accumulate more thermal energy. Surface waters grow warmer year after year, altering currents that have circulated nutrients and oxygen across the globe for ages. The changes unfold almost invisibly. until their consequences begin reaching every corner of the sea. One fascinating clue comes from oxygen isotopes preserved inside microscopic fossil shells. By measuring tiny differences between these isotopes, paleoclimatologists estimate ancient ocean temperatures with astonishing precision. These chemical fingerprints suggest that tropical sea surface temperatures during the end Permian crisis may have exceeded 35 degrees Celsius in some regions. That is extraordinarily warm, perhaps uncomfortably so. Scientists continue debating the exact numbers because different fossil groups sometimes preserve slightly different signals. Even so, the overall trend remains unmistakable. The oceans were heating dramatically. You wade farther into the shallow water. Gentle waves brush against your legs with surprising warmth. Schools of fish remain active, yet they seem concentrated in slightly deeper channels where cooler water lingers. Animals often follow comfort, even fish. Far offshore, the sea appears calm beneath the midday sun. Yet beneath that peaceful surface, invisible changes are beginning to affect something every marine creature depends upon. Oxygen! Modern oceans constantly exchange oxygen with the atmosphere. Winds stir surface waters, waves mix the upper layers. Cold water sinks while deeper water rises, creating slow global circulation that transports oxygen throughout much of the sea. Warming interrupts that balance. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cool water. At the same time, stronger temperature differences between surface and deep water reduce vertical mixing. The upper ocean becomes increasingly separated from the depth below. The sea begins breathing less efficiently, not because oxygen disappears entirely, because it no longer reaches every place that needs it. Researchers call this process ocean deoxygenation. It's one of the leading explanations for the extraordinary marine losses that followed. Exactly how extensive oxygen depletion became in different basins remains actively investigated. New drilling projects continue revealing additional pieces of this immense geological puzzle. Every sediment core tells another fragment of the story. A gentle breeze ripples across the water. The salty air carries a pleasant freshness, mixed with the faint aroma of seaweed drying beneath the afternoon sun. Waves continue arriving with patient regularity, erasing your footprints almost as quickly as you leave them. The shoreline appears timeless, yet its future is already changing. One curious idea has emerged from recent computer simulations. Some researchers suggest that parts of the deep ocean may have remained oxygen poor for hundreds of thousands of years after the initial environmental crisis began. If true recovery would have been extraordinarily slow, the sea does not heal quickly, especially when the fever continues. As evening approaches, golden sunlight dances across the quiet waves. The tide rises gently around smooth rocks polished by countless ages. Small marine creatures continue their daily routines, unaware that the world supporting them is gradually becoming less hospitable. You stand at the water's edge and take one slow breath. The ocean answers with another gentle wave. It is still breathing, still alive, but each breath has become just a little shallower than the last. And somewhere beneath those calm waters, the deepest parts of the sea are beginning to hold their breath. Section 9. The sea greets another dawn with perfect composure. Gentle waves roll across the shoreline in slow, even rhythms, polishing smooth stones that have rested here for ages beyond counting. The first rays of sunlight spill across the water, turning its surface into a sheet of shimmering gold. A light breeze carries the familiar scent of salt, damp sand and seaweed drying upon scattered rocks. It is a beautiful morning, perhaps too beautiful. You have now spent many quiet days wandering through the closing chapter of the Permian world. The forests have begun thinning. The afternoons have grown steadily warmer. Rivers have become less generous with their water. Yet the ocean still appears calm, almost inviting. Its greatest changes remain hidden. You step into a small wooden boat. Of course no humans built it. This simple vessel belongs only to your imagination, carrying you gently away from the shoreline and toward deeper water where the sea gradually darkens beneath the morning sky. The breeze fills with cool moisture. The steady sound of waves becomes softer as land slowly fades behind you. Out here, surrounded by open water, the world feels wonderfully peaceful. The horizon stretches in every direction without interruption. Above you, enormous dragonfly-like insects occasionally drift far from shore before turning back toward land. Beneath the surface, unfamiliar fish glide silently through shafts of sunlight that penetrate only the upper layers of the sea. Everything seems comfortably alive, yet appearances continue, telling only half the story. Earth's atmosphere grows richer in carbon dioxide, the oceans absorb increasing amounts of heat. Surface waters become warmer, while deeper waters remain comparatively cool. That difference matters. Warm water is lighter than cold water. Because of this simple physical principle, the upper ocean becomes increasingly reluctant to mix with the depths below. The familiar circulation that once carried oxygen downward begins slowing. The sea develops layers, almost like oil floating upon water. Each layer grows more isolated from the next. Scientists describe this process as ocean stratification. The word sounds technical. The consequences are deeply personal for every marine creature. Imagine living inside a house where fresh air reaches only the upstairs rooms. Day after day, the lower floors receive less ventilation until breathing gradually becomes difficult. The deep ocean experiences something remarkably similar. Oxygen continues entering the surface through waves and contact with the atmosphere, but less of it reaches the depths. You lean over the side of your imaginary boat. The water nearest the surface appears astonishingly clear. Tiny floating organisms drift through the sunlight, almost invisible unless you watch carefully. These microscopic creatures seem insignificant. In reality, they help sustain entire marine ecosystems. Much like modern plankton, ancient microorganisms formed the foundation of enormous food webs, stretching from the smallest invertebrates to the largest marine predators of their time. Life begins here. It always has. Researchers studying ancient marine sediments have found compelling evidence that oxygen levels declined across large portions of the world's oceans during the end Permian crisis. Some sedimentary rocks contain unusually high concentrations of minerals that form only when oxygen becomes scarce or disappears entirely. Black shells tell part of this story. Their dark color reflects organic material that accumulated because decomposition slowed dramatically in oxygen-poor conditions. The sea kept careful records, layer by layer. One fascinating clue comes from tiny fossils no larger than grains of sand. The distribution of microscopic marine organisms changes noticeably across rock layers dating to the Great Dying. Species adapted to well-oxygenated water gradually disappear from certain regions, while organisms capable of tolerating lower oxygen levels become increasingly common. The transition unfolds quietly, then accelerates. Scientists continued discussing exactly how widespread oxygen depletion became near coastlines compared with deeper ocean basins. Different regions almost certainly experience different conditions. The world's oceans are never perfectly uniform. They never were. You drift farther from shore. The water beneath your boat changes from brilliant turquoise to deep sapphire blue. Gentle swells lift and lower you with a soothing rhythm that almost invites sleep. The silence feels profound. Then you notice something. There are fewer fish. Not none. Simply fewer. Perhaps they have followed cooler currents elsewhere. Perhaps they remain deeper beneath the surface. Or perhaps the ecosystem has already begun adjusting to environmental changes too gradual for any individual creature to recognize. Nature often redistributes itself before it declines. That distinction matters. One curious aspect of marine life is that many animals cannot simply leave when oxygen levels begin falling. Shellfish remain attached to rocks. Corals build reefs in fixed locations. Countless bottom-dwelling organisms spend their entire lives within remarkably small territories. When conditions deteriorate, escape is not always possible. Adaptation becomes the only option. Not every species possesses enough flexibility. As afternoon sunlight warms the sea, you trail your hand through the water. It feels pleasantly warm, almost like bath water. That simple sensation would have been surprising in many ancient oceans where cooler temperatures once carried abundant dissolved oxygen throughout marine ecosystems. Warm water changes everything. It encourages faster metabolism. Animals require more oxygen, yet the water contains less. The imbalance quietly grows. A gentle wind strengthens across the open sea. Tiny whitecaps appear upon the waves before disappearing just as quickly. Salt spray cools your face while the rhythmic creaking of your little boat blends with the endless murmur of the ocean. The sounds remain comforting, almost timeless. Yet far below, beyond the reach of sunlight, darkness has begun claiming more than light alone. Oxygen concentrations continue falling. Marine organisms living near the seabed face increasingly difficult conditions. Some migrate if they can. Many cannot. The deep ocean grows quieter. Researchers have uncovered evidence suggesting that certain marine communities experienced repeated episodes of oxygen loss rather than one uninterrupted collapse. Conditions may have improved temporarily before deteriorating once again. The ocean, like the atmosphere, appears to have changed in pulses. Recovery, decline, recovery, then deeper decline. Exactly what controlled those cycles remains one of paleontology's most intriguing mysteries. Earth seldom changes in perfectly straight lines. You eventually turn back toward the distant coastline. From here, the forests still appear lush beneath the afternoon sun. Rivers continue emptying into the sea exactly as they always have. Clouds drift peacefully overhead. The world remains beautiful. It simply carries invisible burdens. As evening approaches, the sunlight softens into brilliant shades of copper and gold. The sea reflects every colour. For a few breathtaking moments, it is difficult to imagine a more peaceful place. Then you remember what lies beneath. The surface still breathes with gentle waves. The depths no longer breathe so easily. Invisible pockets of oxygen-poor water continue expanding through the ancient oceans, quietly reshaping ecosystems that had flourished for millions of years. No creature upon the shoreline hears this struggle. No animal beneath the trees understands it. But the sea remembers. Its deepest waters have begun holding secrets that will remain buried for another 252 million years, waiting patiently for curious minds to uncover them, one fossil, one mineral, and one quiet layer of stone at a time. Section 10. Night falls without ceremony. The last traces of sunlight disappear beneath the western horizon, leaving the immense world of Pangaea wrapped in cool blue shadows. Stars emerge one after another, filling the sky with a brilliance that feels almost unreal. There are no city lights to soften their glow, no distant roads, no smoke rising from human settlements. Only darkness, only the quiet breathing of an ancient world. You stand once again upon the shoreline where gentle waves lap against smooth stones polished by countless tides. The ocean seems calm beneath the moonlight. Its surface glitters like hammered silver, while a soft breeze carries the familiar scent of salt and damp sand. Everything appears peaceful, yet tonight marks a turning point, not because every creature suddenly disappears, not because the forest instantly falls silent, but because the invisible pressures building across the planet finally begin overwhelming systems that have remained stable for millions of years. This is the night Earth, in a sense, stopped breathing. Not literally, but biologically, ecologically, almost everywhere at once. You close your eyes for a moment and simply listen. The waves continue their patient rhythm. The breeze whispers through distant coastal vegetation. Some insects still sing, others no longer do. The silence between their calls has become noticeably longer than when your journey first began. It is a subtle change. The most devastating transformations often are. Far beneath the ocean's shimmering surface, oxygen-poor waters continue spreading through deeper basins. Entire communities of bottom-dwelling organisms struggle to survive in environments that once sustained extraordinary diversity. Many attempt to adapt. Some succeed briefly. Many do not. Researchers estimate that approximately 90% of marine species disappeared during the end Permian extinction, making it the greatest biological crisis known in Earth's history. The exact percentage continues to be refined as new fossil discoveries emerge. Whether it was 90% or slightly less, the conclusion remains extraordinary. No other known extinction matches its scale. You imagine descending slowly beneath the waves. Moonlight fades as deeper water surrounds you. The upper layers still contain life. Fish continue swimming through dim blue light while microscopic organisms drift with gentle currents. Then the water changes. The deeper you descend, the quieter everything becomes. The seabed that once supported thriving communities now appears strangely sparse. Shells lie undisturbed upon the dark sediments. Burrows stand abandoned. Creatures that once filtered food from passing currents have vanished from large stretches of the ocean floor. It is not dramatic. It is emptiness, the kind that grows gradually. Scientists studying fossil reefs have found entire ecosystems ending abruptly within thin layers of rock. Coral-like organisms, sponges, brachiopods, trilobites, and countless other marine groups suffered catastrophic losses. Some vanished forever. Others survived only through a handful of remarkably fortunate species. One curious observation has puzzled paleontologists for decades. Certain organisms living in already stressful environments sometimes survive better than relatives inhabiting more stable ecosystems. Perhaps constant hardship had already prepared them for changing conditions. Perhaps simple chance played a larger role than anyone realizes. Researchers continue exploring both possibilities. Nature rarely offers simple explanation. You rise once more to the shoreline. The night air feels warmer than it should. The breeze lacks the refreshing coolness you experienced earlier in your journey, even after sunset heat lingers within rocks and soil slowly radiating back into the atmosphere. The Earth is retaining warmth, exactly as greenhouse gases allow it to do. Nearby, a small group of dicynodonts drinks quietly from a freshwater stream entering the sea. Their movements remain calm. Their behavior remains familiar. Yet food has become harder to find. Vegetation grows less predictably. Migration routes lengthen. Young animals face increasingly uncertain seasons. The changes are now reaching every level of the food web. Predators discover for fewer healthy prey. Herbivores travel farther between feeding grounds. Plants struggle beneath prolonged heat and shifting rainfall. Every thread connecting the ecosystem begins tightening. One thread snaps, then another. Soon entire networks begin unraveling. You walk inland beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The familiar forest still stands around you, but wide gaps now interrupt the once unbroken canopy. Fallen trunks lie scattered across dry ground. Seedlings appear less numerous than before. The forest still lives. It simply no longer thrives. A warm wind rustles brittle branches overhead. The sound feels as though different. Sharper, drier, almost hollow. Researchers examining fossil pollen have documented dramatic shifts in plant communities across the extinction interval. Many long-dominant forest species decline rapidly, while hardier opportunistic plants briefly spread into newly opened landscapes. Recovery does not begin immediately. First comes replacement, then uncertainty. Only much later does stability slowly return. You pause beside a shallow pond visited earlier in your journey. The waterline has receded noticeably. Mud cracks along its edges where amphibians once rested in abundance. A few remain, but their numbers seem smaller. Perhaps they have moved elsewhere. Perhaps there is nowhere left to go. One remarkable feature of the Great Dying is that it affected both the oceans and continents almost simultaneously. Marine ecosystems collapsed. Forests declined. Freshwater habitats changed. Even insects among the most resilient groups of animals on Earth appear to have suffered significant losses during this period. That is extraordinarily unusual. Insects have survived many mass extinctions remarkably well. This one reached even them. Scientists still debate exactly why insect diversity declined so dramatically. Habitat loss, climate stress, changing vegetation, and disrupted food webs probably combined in ways still being unraveled today. The answers remain incomplete. The rocks continue teaching. You climb one final ridge overlooking both forest and sea. Moonlight stretches across the landscape, revealing a world still astonishingly beautiful, despite its growing fragility. The ocean glimmers peacefully. The trees sway gently. Warm air drifts across the hills. Nothing here resembles the dramatic endings often imagined in stories. Instead, this extinction unfolds like an endless exhaustion. Every year becomes a little harder. Every generation inherits a slightly poorer world. Eventually, the accumulated burden becomes too great. One species disappears, then another, then thousands. Not because life stops fighting, because the planet itself has changed faster than many forms of life can follow. You take one clear, simple, slow breath. The air remains breathable. The forests remain standing. The sea still reaches the shore with patient waves. Yet the living earth no longer exchanges life as freely as it once did. The forests produce less. The oceans circulate less. The ecosystems connect less. It is as though the entire planet has taken a deep breath and found it increasingly difficult to exhale. By the time this long night finally begins to pass, nearly every corner of the world will carry the scars of what has happened. The Great Dying has reached its height. The old Permian world is quietly slipping away, and somewhere beyond the eastern horizon a very different morning is waiting for those fortunate enough to survive. Section 11. Morning returns. Not triumphantly, not with the joyful confidence that greeted the first days of your journey. Instead, dawn arrives gently, almost cautiously, as though the sun itself is uncertain what it will find beneath the fading darkness. Pale light spreads across the horizon, touching rivers, hills, and forests that have endured the greatest biological crisis the planet has ever known. You stand quietly and watch. The world is still here. That by itself feels remarkable. A cool breeze drifts across your face, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with dry bark and weathered stone. The air is noticeably calmer than before. Even the insects seem reluctant to disturb the silence. You listen. There are sounds, just fewer of them. The forest has not disappeared overnight. It has become quieter. A few hardy trees still rise above the landscape, their branches catching the first golden light of morning. Patches of vegetation cling stubbornly to riverbanks where moisture remains dependable. Ferns unfurl beside streams and scattered seed plants continue producing the next generation. Life has not surrendered. It has simply become much smaller. You begin walking through the woodland. The path feels strangely open. Weeks earlier, dense vegetation surrounded you from every direction. Towering conifers shaded the forest floor and thick undergrowth softened every footstep. Now broad gaps interrupt the canopy. Fallen trunks lie undisturbed but where they collapsed seasons ago, slowly returning to the soil. The forest breathes, just more softly. Researchers studying rock formations from the earliest Triassic period have found evidence that many forests required astonishingly long periods to recover after the extinction. In some regions, complex woodlands remained absent for millions of years, replaced by simpler plant communities better suited to unstable environments. Recovery takes patience. Nature has plenty of it. A small movement catches your eye. Near the edge of a clearing, a lone dicynodont lowers its head toward a cluster of hardy plants growing beside a narrow stream. It feeds slowly, pausing often to lift its head and scan the surrounding landscape. Its herd is gone. Perhaps they moved elsewhere. Perhaps they simply did not survive. You cannot know. Neither can it. The animal continues eating with quiet determination. There is no room for nostalgia in the natural world, only survival. That quiet resilience becomes one of the defining stories of this new age. Mass extinctions often capture attention because of what disappears. The equally remarkable story belongs to what remains. Every survivor carries possibilities impossible to predict. Some will vanish soon afterward. Others will become ancestors to entirely new chapters in Earth's history. The future rarely announces itself clearly. You continue toward a broad floodplain where a river still winds patiently across the landscape. Its waters sparkle beneath the rising sun, though the current appears slower than during your first visit. Along the muddy banks, clusters of horsetails continue growing their tall green stems, swaying gently in the breeze. Fresh life always seeks water. It always has. The scent here feels different. Moist soil mixes with the faint aroma of decaying vegetation, creating a rich, earthy fragrance that speaks of both endings and beginnings. Tiny insects hover above the river surface, while small amphibians cautiously emerge from sheltered pools. Their numbers seem modest. Their determination does not. One fascinating discovery has emerged from decades of fossil research. Certain hardy plants spread rapidly across devastated landscapes after the Great Dying, behaving almost like ecological first responders. Among them were lycophytes, ancient relatives of today's club mosses, which often colonized disturbed environments before larger forests eventually returned. Scientists sometimes refer to these as disaster species, not because they cause catastrophe, because they flourished after it. Their success tells an important story. Nature does not leave empty spaces unfilled for long. Someone always arrives. Exactly which plant groups dominated recovery varied from region to region, and paleobotanists continue debating the precise timing of those transitions. Different valleys recovered differently. The earth rarely heals uniformly. You kneel beside the river and let cool water flow across your hands. Its refreshing touch contrasts pleasantly with the warming air. Smooth pebbles rest beneath the clear current polished by countless years of gentle movement. The river has witnessed everything. Volcanic eruptions, changing climates, the disappearance of entire ecosystems. Still it flows. There is something deeply comforting about that persistence. Far overhead, thin clouds drift lazily across an open blue sky. The atmosphere remains warmer than before the crisis, yet the relentless environmental upheaval has begun easing in some regions. Volcanic activity still continues, but the pace of planetary transformation is no longer accelerating as dramatically as before. The worst has passed. Its consequences have not. Recovery after a mass extinction is unlike rebuilding a village after a storm. There are no architects, no blueprints, no one directing the process. Every surviving organism simply continues living, reproducing, competing, and adapting. Over immense spans of time, those countless individual decisions gradually reshape the entire biosphere. Evolution works quietly, almost invisibly. You climb a gentle hillside overlooking the valley. The landscape feels both familiar and unfamiliar. Many landmarks remained unchanged. The mountains still rise in the distance. Rivers continue following ancient courses carved through the land long before your arrival. Yet the living fabric covering that landscape has changed profoundly. Fewer large animals roam the plains. The forests no longer seem endless. Silence occupies spaces once filled with constant activity. It is not an empty world. It is a simplified one. One curious idea continues to intrigue paleontologists. Some researchers suggest that ecosystems recovering from the Great Dying may have experienced repeated setbacks rather than smooth improvement. Climatic instability, lingering volcanic influences, and fluctuating environmental conditions could have interrupted recovery several times before long-term stability finally returned. Nature may have stumbled forward, not walked steadily. The evidence continues growing. So do the question. As afternoon approaches, gentle sunlight filters through scattered branches overhead. A light breeze carries the pleasant scent of fresh greenery from young plants reclaiming abandoned ground. Tiny insects continue their careful work among leaves that only recently emerged from the soil. Life feels quieter, yet somehow more precious. Perhaps abundance makes us overlook ordinary moments. Scarcity teaches us to notice them. You stop beside a weathered stump, placing your hand upon its rough surface. Once it belonged to a towering tree that shaded countless generations of animals. Now moss slowly spreads across its decaying wood. A new seedling grows nearby. Its roots reach into soil enriched by the tree that came before. The old nourishes the new. That simple exchange has never stopped. Even during Earth's darkest chapters, as evening approaches, once more golden light stretches across the recovering landscape. The breeze cools gently. The river continues singing its quiet song. Somewhere beyond the trees, a small therapsid disappears into the undergrowth, carrying food for its young. Tomorrow it will search again. Then the next day. Then the next generation. Recovery has begun. Not dramatically, not quickly, but unmistakably. The longest morning in Earth's history has finally arrived, and beneath the same ancient sky, life has chosen once again to keep walking. Section 12. The morning grows brighter with every passing hour. Golden sunlight spreads across the recovering landscape, warming the stones that cooled beneath the night sky only a short time ago. Thin ribbons of mist rise from rivers winding through broad valleys, disappearing as gentle breezes carry them into the warming air. The scent of damp soil returns, mingling with fresh greenery and weathered bark. It smells like hope, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. You continue your journey through a world that no longer resembles the thriving Permian wilderness where you first arrived. The forests remain scattered. The great herds have become uncommon. Entire branches of life's family tree have vanished forever. And yet, the land is not empty. That simple truth changes everything. A small movement catches your eye near the edge of a stream. A compact therapsid emerges from beneath a fallen log. Its body is no larger than a modern fox, with sturdy limbs, alert eyes, and a cautious posture that suggests constant awareness of its surroundings. It pauses, listens, then continues searching among damp leaves. You find yourself smiling, not because it is extraordinary, because it survived. The history of life often celebrates giants, towering dinosaurs, massive marine reptiles, gigantic mammals. Yet after Earth's greatest extinction, survival belongs less to the largest animals than to the adaptable ones. Sometimes being small becomes an advantage. Smaller bodies require less food, less water, less territory. When ecosystems shrink, efficiency suddenly matters more than size. Researchers studying fossils from the earliest Triassic have repeatedly found that relatively modest generalist species often weathered the crisis better than highly specialized animals. Flexibility becomes a remarkable survival tool. Nature rewards versatility during uncertain times. You continue walking through open woodland where young plants are gradually reclaiming disturbed ground. The vegetation appears different now. Instead of towering ancient forests stretching endlessly toward the horizon, patches of shrubs, hardy seed plants, ferns, and low conifers create a mosaic across the landscape. The scenery feels unfinished, almost experimental. Evolution is beginning again, one species at a time. The breeze carries the pleasant aroma of fresh leaves warmed by the morning sun. Tiny insects move quietly among new growth, while several amphibians rest beside shaded pools that still retain enough moisture despite the warmer climate. Life continues finding opportunities. It always does. You kneel beside a cluster of young plants emerging through gravel deposited by recent floods. Their roots grip loose sediment surprisingly well. These are pioneers, not because they are stronger, because they arrive first. Modern ecologists observe similar patterns after volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and landslides. Certain plants specialize in colonizing damaged landscapes before slow-growing forests eventually return. The same principle likely shaped recovery after the Great Dying. Ancient disaster landscapes gradually welcome species capable of tolerating instability. Scientists continue debating precisely which plant communities dominated different regions during the earliest stages of recovery. The fossil record varies across continents. Each discovery adds another piece to an enormous botanical puzzle. You follow the river downstream. Its waters remain clear despite carrying fine sediments washed from distant hillsides. Sunlight sparkles across the current, while dragonfly-like insects skim just above the surface. The river sounds comforting, soft, steady, almost unchanged. Rivers often become lifelines after ecological disruption. They transport nutrients, provide reliable water, support vegetation, create corridors through otherwise difficult landscapes. Animals naturally gather near them. You notice fresh footprints pressed into damp mud. Several different species have visited recently. Some belong to herbivores, others clearly belong to predators. Both still depend upon the same water. Mass extinctions simplify ecosystem. They rarely eliminate relationships entirely. Predators still hunt, plants still grow, animals still compete. The cast has changed. The play continues. One remarkable survivor from this difficult period is an animal called Lystrosaurus. You recognize one grazing quietly in the distance. Its sturdy body resembles a compact barrel, balanced upon strong legs. The familiar beak and downward-pointing tusks give it an oddly determined expression as it calmly uproots hardy vegetation growing beside the floodplain. Few animals become symbols of planetary survival. Lystrosaurus earns that distinction. After the great dying fossils of this resilient herbivore appear across enormous portions of Pangaea, from what will someday become Africa to Antarctica, India and beyond. For a time, it becomes one of Earth's most successful large land animals. Success, however, carries an unusual meaning here. It does not mean abundance, it means endurance. Researchers estimate that Lystrosaurus may have represented an astonishing proportion of terrestrial vertebrates in some early Triassic ecosystems. Exactly why it proved so successful remains debated. Perhaps it tolerated harsh climates. Perhaps it reproduced efficiently. Perhaps simple good fortune played a role. Evolution often combines all three. The sun climbs higher. Warm air shimmers gently above exposed rocks, while the shade beneath scattered trees offers welcome relief. You rest beneath one young conifer, placing your hand upon its slender trunk. Its bark feels smooth compared with the ancient giants you encountered earlier in your journey. This forest is young, not merely in age, in history. Entire ecological communities are being assembled almost from scratch. Imagine rebuilding a city after nearly every building has disappeared. Roads remain, the land remains. Everything else must slowly return. Nature undertakes that enormous task without architects. Only time. One curious observation continues intriguing paleontologists. Many early Triassic ecosystems appear surprisingly simple compared with the extraordinarily diverse Permian communities that preceded them. Food webs contain fewer species. Predator-prey relationships become less complex. Ecological niches remain only partially occupied. Recovery begins with simplicity. Complexity takes much longer. Some researchers suggest that this simplified world may have been especially vulnerable to additional environmental disturbances during the early stages of recovery. A single setback could ripple through ecosystems with fewer alternative pathways. The discussion continues. Every fossil offers another clue. Afternoon gradually softens toward evening. Golden light spills across the valley, illuminating grasses waving gently beside the river. A small group of Lystrosaurus wanders slowly toward fresh vegetation, while a cautious therapsid watches from the shelter of nearby shrubs. No panic, no urgency, just another ordinary evening. That quiet normality feels almost miraculous after everything the planet has endured. You walk one final time beside the river. The breeze cools pleasantly. Water murmurs over the smooth stones. Insects continue their patient work among reeds lining the shore. Life no longer fills every corner of the landscape, but where it remains, it persists with astonishing determination. The survivors are not merely enduring the end of an old world, they are unknowingly building the beginning of a new one. Each cautious step, each successful season, each newborn generation, together they become the first quiet sentences in the next great chapter of Earth's history. The world is still healing, slowly, patiently, and every sunrise now belongs not to the age that has passed, but to the countless possibilities still waiting to evolve. Section 13. The evening breeze returns with gentle confidence. It slips quietly through the young forest, stirring fresh leaves that did not exist when your journey first began. The air still carries warmth from the long afternoon, yet beneath that lingering heat rests a welcome coolness drifting upward from rivers and shaded valleys. The scent of damp earth has become stronger again, mingling with resin moss and the faint sweetness of new vegetation. You stop for a moment. The landscape feels different, not because it has completely recovered, because it has begun changing direction. For countless generations during the height of the catastrophe, nearly every environmental trend pointed toward loss. Forests became smaller, oceans struggled for oxygen, heat spread farther across the land. Entire branches of life's family tree disappeared into history. Now another force has quietly taken over. Opportunity. Not for everyone, for those still standing. You continue walking along a broad valley where scattered conifers cast long shadows across open grasslands. Young ferns spread beneath their branches, while hardy shrubs fill empty spaces left vacant by vanished forests. Nothing here appears permanent. Everything seems to be experimenting. Nature has entered one of its most creative periods. Mass extinctions remove competitors. They also create possibilities. Ecological niches once occupied for millions of years now stand empty, waiting for new inhabitants. Food sources remain available. Hunting grounds lie unclaimed. Entire habitats lack the animals that once dominated them. The world has become quieter. It has also become less crowded. A small therapsid darts across your path before disappearing beneath the dense vegetation. Moments later, another follows, carrying what appears to be a bundle of roots or tender shoots back toward its shelter. Life has resumed ordinary routines. Searching, eating, protecting. Raising young. Those simple activities quietly rebuild the planet, one generation at a time. You climb a gentle hillside overlooking a broad floodplain. The river below twists lazily through fresh green vegetation, leaving rich deposits of sediment along its banks after each seasonal flood. Tiny insects drift above the water while amphibians rest beneath overhanging plants that have only recently reclaimed the shoreline. Everything feels young, not in age, in possibility. Scientists often describe the aftermath of mass extinctions as evolutionary bottlenecks. Only a relatively small fraction of species survives, yet those survivors become the ancestors of everything that follows. Imagine a vast library trashed by fire. Only a handful of books remain. Every future edition must begin with those few surviving volumes. Evolution works in much the same way. One fascinating example appears all around you. Many surviving plants possess broad ecological tolerance. They thrive under changing temperatures, unpredictable rainfall, and disturbed soils where more specialized species struggle. Flexibility has become valuable. Perfection can wait. Researchers continue examining fossil pollen and plant spores from early Triassic rocks to understand exactly how vegetation returned across different regions. The recovery was far from uniform. Some valleys regained forests relatively quickly. Others remained dominated by low-growing plants for astonishing lengths of time. Earth heals according to local conditions, not universal schedules. You kneel beside a cluster of fresh ferns emerging through rich soil. Their delicate fronds unfurl slowly toward filtered sunlight, each leaf opening with remarkable precision, despite the enormous changes surrounding it. No creature instructed them. No memory guided them. Their ancient genetic instructions simply continued doing what they had always done. Grow, spread, persist. There is something quietly reassuring about that. The breeze strengthens slightly. It carries the pleasant fragrance of fresh greenery mixed with cool river water. The oppressive dryness that marked early sections of your journey has eased here, though the climate remains warmer than before the Great Dying. Recovery does not erase history. It builds upon it. Far across the valley, several Lystrosaurus continue feeding peacefully among low vegetation. Their sturdy bodies move with slow confidence while younger individuals remain close beside experienced adults. They dominate this recovering landscape. Not because they are spectacular, because they are dependable. Few animals illustrate resilience more clearly. Paleontologists have uncovered Lystrosaurus fossils in extraordinary abundance across multiple continents, making them one of the defining symbols of the early Triassic world. Some fossil sites contain so many individuals that researchers once wondered whether catastrophic floods had concentrated the remains. Others suggest these animals naturally gathered in large populations around dependable water sources. The discussion continues. Every excavation brings new evidence. The Earth still enjoys surprising its students. You resume your walk beneath scattered trees. The afternoon sun filters gently through their branches, creating shifting patterns of light across the forest floor. Small insects hum softly among flowering plants. Then you pause. Flowering plants. Not yet. You smile at the thought. The colourful blossoms familiar today have still not evolved. Instead, seed ferns, conifers, cycads, and other ancient plant groups provide the greenery surrounding you. It's easy for a modern imagination to quietly insert flowers where none existed. Deep time constantly reminds us how different familiar landscapes once looked. One curious question has occupied scientists for many years. How quickly did ecological complexity return after the Great Dying? The answer appears to be remarkably slowly. Food webs remained relatively simple for extended periods. Predator diversity stayed limited. Large herbivore communities recovered unevenly. Complex ecosystems require many successful partnerships. Those relationships cannot be rushed. They must evolve patiently. You stop beside another quiet stream. Its cool water tumbles gently over rounded stones before disappearing beneath low branches hanging across the bank. Tiny aquatic creatures dart through clear pools while dragonfly-like insects hover motionless above the surface. The stream feels wonderfully alive. Small places often recover first, large ecosystems follow later. That same principle appears throughout modern ecology after floods, volcanic eruptions, and forest fires. Local habitats sometimes regain stability surprisingly quickly, even while the broader landscape continues struggling. Nature rebuilds from countless little successes, not one grand miracle. As evening approaches, the valley glows beneath warm amber light. Long shadows stretch across open meadows where hardy vegetation now covers ground that once seemed hopelessly barren. Young trees continue reaching upward, while older survivors provide shelter from wind and sun. The landscape no longer feels fragile. It feels determined. One remarkable truth quietly emerges from every step of your journey. The Great Dying did not mark the end of life. It marked the end of one version of life. Every extinction closes doors. Every recovery opens different ones. Without this slow rebuilding, many future lineages, including the ancestors of dinosaurs, mammals, birds, and eventually humans, would never have found the opportunities that allowed them to flourish. The future often begins inside unexpected endings. You stand upon the hillside as the first evening stars appear overhead. The familiar constellations shine once more across a world still healing from unimaginable loss. A gentle breeze cools your face. The river continues its endless song. Somewhere beyond the trees, young survivors settle quietly for another night beneath the ancient skia. They know nothing of evolution, nothing of extinction, nothing of the immense future waiting beyond millions of years. They simply live. Sometimes, that is the greatest act of hope the natural world can offer. Section 14. A soft dawn spreads across the recovering world. The eastern sky brightens with gentle shades of pale gold and quiet lavender, while the last stars slowly disappear into the growing light. Cool air drifts through young forests that now cover patches of land once left nearly barren. Dew clings to fresh leaves sparkling like tiny crystals before the first warmth of the morning begins to lift them into the air. You breathe slowly. The world feels calmer today. Not because every danger has vanished, because life has learned to live with what remains. The river beside you murmurs steadily over smooth stones, sounding almost exactly as it did millions of years before the Great Dying began. Water has always possessed remarkable patience. It simply continues flowing, carrying fragments of mountains toward distant seas, without concern for the creatures drinking along its banks. You follow its course once more. The valley has become increasingly familiar during your long journey, yet each morning reveals subtle changes. New plants appear where open ground stood only a few seasons earlier. Moss spreads across fallen trunks. Small shrubs take root beside weathered stones that recently lay exposed beneath the relentless sun. Recovery rarely announces itself. It quietly accumulates. Far ahead movement catches your attention. Several unfamiliar animals emerge cautiously from the edge of a woodland clearing. They are neither the dominant therapsids you have grown accustomed to, nor the sturdy Lystrosaurus that became symbols of survival. These creatures carry themselves differently. Their limbs stand more directly beneath their bodies. Their movements appear lighter, quicker, more efficient. You're watching early archosaurs. They are not dinosaurs. Not yet. But they belong to the evolutionary branch from which dinosaurs, crocodilians, and eventually birds will emerge millions of years in the future. At this moment, however, they remain modest participants in a recovering ecosystem. History often begins quietly. Few observers standing here would predict that descendants of these cautious animals will someday dominate the planet for more than 160 million years. Great empires seldom announce themselves in infancy. You remain perfectly still. One young archosaur pauses beside the river to drink before lifting its narrow head to study the surrounding landscape. Its alert posture suggests an animal constantly evaluating opportunities and risks. Adaptability shines through every movement. Scientists have long discussed why archosaurs eventually became so successful after the Permian extinction. Several ideas continue attracting attention. Their more upright posture may have improved walking efficiency. Certain respiratory adaptations could have offered advantages under changing atmospheric conditions. Rapid growth or reproductive strategies may also have contributed. Exactly which traits proved most important remains an active area of research. Evolution rarely crowns a single winner for one simple reason. Success usually emerges from many small advantages working together. The morning breeze carries fresh scents across the valley. Young conifers release sharp, resinous aromas warmed by the rising sun. Damp soil adds a rich earthy fragrance beneath the sweeter smell of new vegetation reclaiming abandoned ground. The forest no longer resembles the ancient Permian woodland where your journey began. It has become something new. Different species now share space once occupied by vanished giants. Ecological roles remain only partially filled, allowing newcomers to explore possibilities that did not exist before. Nature dislikes empty soil. Someone always steps forward. Nearby, small therapsid searches among fallen branches for insects hidden beneath loose bark. Only a short distance away, one of the young archosaurs investigates nearly the same area. They occupy similar worlds, yet their futures will differ dramatically. For millions of years, these lineages will continue evolving side by side, sometimes competing, sometimes avoiding one another, sometimes flourishing together. The future remains wonderfully uncertain. One fascinating clue comes from fossil footprints. In several early Triassic rock formations, paleontologists have discovered trackways showing different animal groups moving across the same muddy floodplains within relatively short periods. These ancient footprints preserve moments rather than bones. They reveal behavior, direction, speed, sometimes even hesitation. A sudden change in stride length may hint at an animal accelerating unexpectedly. A cluster of overlapping tracks might suggest several individuals traveling together. The mud remembers remarkably well. Researchers continued debating exactly which species created certain famous trackways, because footprints rarely preserve enough anatomical detail for complete certainty. Even so, they offer extraordinary glimpses into lives otherwise lost. You continue toward higher ground. From the ridge above the recovering valley stretches beneath the brightening sky like an unfinished painting. Rivers weave gracefully through patches of woodland, while open grasslands shimmer beneath gentle morning light. The landscape feels balanced again, not fully restored, simply balanced enough. One curious pattern repeatedly appears throughout Earth's history. After major extinctions, evolutionary innovation often accelerates. When ecological spaces become available, surviving lineages begin exploring new body shapes, feeding strategies and behaviors. Over immense spans of time, entirely new communities emerge from those countless experiments. Most fail. Some succeed beyond imagination. The Great Dying erased extraordinary diversity. It also created opportunities that would eventually reshape life forever. You pause beneath a young conifer. Its branches sway gently overhead, producing a soft whisper remarkably similar to modern pine forests. Tiny insects drift through shafts of sunlight while small reptiles bask upon warm rocks nearby. The ordinary beauty of the moment feels surprisingly moving. Life no longer needs to prove anything. It simply continues. One remarkable question still fascinates paleontologists. How long did complete ecological recovery actually require? The answer continues changing as new discoveries emerge. While some ecosystems stabilized relatively quickly, full global recovery, including the return of complex food webs and widespread biodiversity, may have required 5 to 10 million years or even longer. By human standards, that is unimaginable. By geological standards, it is patient. The Earth never rushes. Afternoon gradually softens toward evening. Warm sunlight turns golden as long shadows stretch across the valley. Several archosaurs disappear quietly into the woodland, while a herd of Lystrosaurus continues grazing beside the river, seemingly unconcerned by their smaller neighbours. Two futures share one landscape. Neither knows what lies ahead. The breeze cools pleasantly. Fresh water murmurs across me. Young trees sway beneath an ancient sky that has watched countless worlds rise and fade before. You realize something gentle. Every creature surrounding you believes it lives in the present. None knows it stands inside the opening pages of another extraordinary age. The ancestors of dinosaurs are already walking these valleys. The distant relatives of mammals continue adapting beside them. Neither lineage can imagine where their paths will eventually lead, nor can they imagine one small primate hundreds of millions of years later looking back with quiet wonder. The valley settles peacefully beneath the first evening stars. The Earth is still healing, still experimenting, still dreaming new possibilities beneath familiar constellations. And somewhere among these cautious footsteps, the future has already begun walking. Section 15. Morning arrives wrapped in quiet clarity. A cool mist drifts across the valley before slowly dissolving beneath the first rays of sunlight. Young conifers stand motionless in the still air, their branches holding tiny droplets of dew that sparkle briefly before disappearing into the warmth of the day. The river continues its familiar journey, slipping over smooth stones with the same patient rhythm it has carried throughout your travels. You pause beside its bank. The water seems unchanged, yet almost everything around it has. The world you entered many evenings ago has faded into history. The immense forests of the late Permian have become scattered woodlands. Great animal communities have been reshaped. Entire families of living creatures now exist only as fossils waiting beneath layers of ancient stone. And those stones have been watching all along. Today, instead of following the animals, you begin following the rocks. They have stories of their own. You climb a weathered hillside where layers of exposed stone emerge from the earth like pages in an enormous book. Some bands appear pale grey, others glow with rusty reds, dark browns or deep black streaks running through the cliff face. Each layer represents time. Not years, often thousands of years. Sometimes far more. You reach out and rest your hand against the cool rock. It feels solid, permanent. Yet it is quietly preserving one of the greatest mysteries in Earth's history. Long after every animal you have watched disappears, these stones will remain patiently waiting for curious minds to ask the right questions. Modern geologists often describe rocks as Earth's memory. Unlike human memory, they never intentionally exaggerate. They simply record. Scientists first began recognizing the extraordinary significance of these ancient rock layers more than a century ago. Fossils seemed abundant below certain boundaries, then astonishingly scarce immediately above them. Something dramatic had happened. Exactly what remained unknown. As research expanded across every continent, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The Great Dying had left its signature almost everywhere. You continue along the outcrop, noticing thin dark bands separating lighter layers of sediment. Those narrow lines may appear ordinary. They are anything but. Within them lie chemical fingerprints left behind by changing oceans, volcanic eruptions, shifting climates, and collapsing ecosystems. Tiny variations in carbon isotopes preserved inside ancient minerals reveal enormous disruptions to the global carbon cycle during the end Permian extinction. The chemistry still speaks. If you know how to listen, one fascinating technique involves measuring different forms or isotopes of carbon trapped inside rocks. Living organisms slightly favor lighter carbon during photosynthesis. When enormous amounts of carbon suddenly enter Earth's atmosphere and oceans, that delicate balance shifts in measurable ways. The result becomes a geological signal, a planetary heartbeat recorded into stone. Researchers have found dramatic carbon isotope excursions precisely across the extinction interval in numerous locations around the world. The signal appears remarkably consistent. Its exact cause remains actively debated. Volcanic emissions certainly played a major role. Additional carbon released from underground coal deposits, methane hydrates, or dying ecosystems may also have contributed. The Earth rarely changes for only one reason. You kneel beside a cluster of fossil shells embedded within limestone. Millions of years ago, these animals rested beneath warm Permian seas. Today, only delicate impressions remain preserved with astonishing precision. Some shells belong to species that never crossed the extinction boundary. Their entire lineage ended here. Others resemble relatives that managed to survive and slowly rebuild marine ecosystems over the countless generations. Success and extinction lie only centimeters apart. The stone remembers both equally. A gentle breeze moves across the hillside, carrying the pleasant scent of warm grass and distant conifers. Birds do not sing. They still have not evolved. Instead, the quiet hum of insects drifts upward from the valley below, accompanied by the steady murmur of flowing water. The silence feels appropriate. Ancient rocks encourage quiet thinking. One remarkable discovery continues fascinating paleontologists. Some extinction boundaries appear surprisingly abrupt within local rock sequences, while others seem to unfold more gradually depending upon where they formed. This difference has inspired decades of discussion. Did the extinction occur in several pulses? Did local environments preserve time differently? Were ecosystems collapsing at different rates across the globe? Scientists continue exploring every possibility. No single rock layer tells the complete story. Together, thousands of outcrops begin revealing the larger picture. You continue walking until dark volcanic rock appears beneath your feet. Unlike the layered sediments below, this basalt formed directly from cooling lava. Tiny mineral crystals shimmer faintly in the sunlight, each one locking away information about the conditions under which the molten rock solidified. Even lava keeps records. Modern laboratories use radiometric dating to determine the ages of volcanic minerals with extraordinary precision. Certain radioactive elements decay into stable forms at remarkably predictable rates, allowing geologists to estimate when these rocks crystallized. Time itself becomes measurable, not perfectly, but astonishingly well. By comparing radiometric dates from Siberian lava flows with extinction layers preserved elsewhere, scientists have gradually reconstructed the sequence of events linking immense volcanism to the greatest biological crisis in Earth's history. The picture grows clearer every decade. Still, important questions remain. Exactly how long did the main eruptive pulses last? How quickly did ecosystems respond? Which environmental changes proved most devastating? Each answer uncovers new mysteries. That is the quiet beauty of science. It never truly finishes. You reach the crest of the ridge. From here, the recovering landscape stretches toward distant mountains softened by afternoon haze. Rivers continue winding across broad floodplains where young forests slowly reclaim abandoned ground. It is difficult to imagine that this peaceful scene once stood at the center of unimaginable upheaval, yet the evidence surrounds you. In the rocks, in the fossils, in the chemistry, in the very shape of the land itself. One curious idea occasionally appears outside mainstream scientific discussion. Some have suggested that asteroid impacts or other sudden catastrophes triggered the Great Dying instead of prolonged volcanism. Small impact structures have indeed been identified from roughly similar ages, prompting occasional speculation. Most available evidence, however, strongly supports the Siberian traps as the primary driver, with volcanic activity explaining the broad range of climatic, chemical, and biological changes observed worldwide. Even so, researchers remain open to refining details as new discoveries emerge. Science welcomes better evidence, not louder certainty. The afternoon gradually gives way to evening. Golden light washes across the exposed cliffs, turning ancient rock layers into glowing bands of amber and crimson. Every stratum reflects the setting sun differently, revealing textures carved by the weather over hundreds of millions of years. The hillside almost seems alive, not with movement, with memory. You place your hand upon the stone one final time. It has witnessed forests rise, oceans change. Volcanoes reshape continents, entire worlds disappear, and still it remains. Long after every living voice has fallen silent, the rocks continue telling their patient story to anyone willing to slow down and listen. As twilight settles across the valley, you realize something comforting. Life may be fragile, civilizations may come and go, species may rise and vanish, but the Earth never completely forgets. Its memories are written not in books, but in stone. Section 16. Twilight returns with familiar gentleness. The sky slowly transforms from pale blue into soft shades of amber violet and deepening indigo. A warm breeze moves quietly across the recovering landscape, rustling the branches of young conifers that now cover hills once stripped nearly bare. The river below reflects the fading light like polished bronze, winding patiently toward an ocean still healing from ancient wounds. You stop beside a weathered outcrop. The stone beneath your feet has spent millions of years keeping silent. Only recently has anyone begun asking it questions. The answers it offers are remarkable. The questions it leaves unanswered are perhaps even more fascinating. For every mystery that science patiently untangles, another waits just beyond the edge of certainty. That has always been true. The Great Dying remains one of those extraordinary moments where knowledge and wonder continue walking together. You continue along the ridge as evening settles over the valley. Small insects drift through the cooling air. A cautious Lystrosaurus grazes quietly beside the river, while an early archosaur disappears between scattered trees, leaving only faint footprints pressed into damp soil. Life has returned. Not completely, enough to begin writing another chapter. Human beings have always found endings difficult to accept without stories. Long before geology existed, people across many cultures imagined worlds destroyed and reborn through floodfire, darkness, or divine judgment. Civilizations separated by oceans often carried surprisingly similar tales, describing an earlier age brought to a dramatic close before a new world emerged. Those stories are not descriptions of the Permian extinction. They arose hundreds of millions of years later, yet they reveal something deeply human. We instinctively wonder whether the world before ours ended so that ours could begin. That curiosity still accompanies us today. As you walk beneath the first evening stars, you imagine how impossible the Great Dying would appear without the evidence preserved in stone. Who would believe it? An event so immense that nearly every known ecosystem changed forever. Forests transformed. Oceans suffocated. Entire branches of life's family tree disappeared. It sounds almost mythical. Fortunately, myths are not the only guides available. The rocks remain wonderfully stubborn. They insist upon evidence. One curious discovery has occasionally captured public imagination. In certain end-Permian rock layers, scientists have found unusual concentrations of tiny spherical particles, rare minerals, or chemical anomalies. Over the years, these findings inspired suggestions ranging from hidden asteroid impacts to immense methane explosions, and even more imaginative explanations. Most of those ideas gradually faded after careful investigation. That is how science usually works. Interesting possibilities appear. Evidence tests them patiently. Some survive, many do not. The surviving explanation must account for everything, not merely one intriguing clue. At present, the overwhelming body of evidence continues pointing toward prolonged volcanic activity associated with the Siberian traps as the principal driver of the extinction, interacting with climate change, ocean chemistry, and complex ecological feedbacks. The story proves dramatic enough without adding unnecessary mysteries. Still, genuine mysteries remain. You kneel beside another exposed layer of sediment. Embedded within the stone are tiny fragments of fossilized plants no larger than your fingernail. To most visitors, they would appear insignificant. To a paleobotanist, they resemble handwritten notes from an impossibly distant past. Each fragment reveals something about rainfall, temperature, seasonality, recovery. Nothing is too small to matter. A cool breeze brushes across your hands. It carries the pleasant fragrance of fresh greenery mixed with the mineral scent of weathered rock cooling after a warm afternoon. The valley below grows quieter. Not empty, simply peaceful. One enduring puzzle continues challenging researchers. Why did certain groups survive while closely related species vanished? Consider two animals living in similar habitats, eating similar foods, facing similar climates. One lineage disappears forever. The other persists and eventually gives rise to descendants stretching across millions of years. Chance almost certainly played a role. So did physiology, geography, diet, reproductive strategies, perhaps even simple timing. Scientists still argue about the relative importance of each factor because nature rarely conducts controlled experiments. Instead, it offers clues scattered across continents. Every fossil answers one question while quietly asking another. You continue toward a broad plateau overlooking the recovering world. The last sunlight catches layers of sandstone and basalt, turning them into glowing bands of copper and crimson. The view feels timeless, yet it represents only a brief moment within Earth's astonishing history. If our planet's entire history fit into a single calendar year, the Great Dying would occupy only a tiny fraction of one December day. Human beings would not appear until the final minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve. That perspective is wonderfully humbling. Deep time changes the way ordinary moments feel. One remarkable idea has gained increasing support over recent decades. Rather than viewing the Great Dying as one isolated catastrophe, many scientists now see it as a cascade of interconnected events. Volcanic eruptions altered atmospheric chemistry. The atmosphere warmed. Ocean changed circulation. Oxygen declined. Marine ecosystems weakened. Forests struggled. Wildfires increased in some regions. Soils eroded more easily. Each change influenced the next. The planet behaved like an enormous living network. Pull one thread, many others begin moving. Exactly how strongly each process reinforced the others remains one of the most active areas of modern research. The details continue evolving. The larger picture grows steadily clearer. A small archosaur appears briefly upon a nearby slope before slipping into tall vegetation. You watch it disappear. It has no idea that countless generations of its descendants will eventually include gigantic sauropods walking beneath Jurassic skies, swift hunters crossing Cretaceous floodplains, and feathered birds that will one day sing outside human windows. Its future remains hidden, as does yours. Perhaps that is for the best. The evening grows cooler. The first stars brighten overhead just as they did when your journey began. Their quiet light falls upon rivers, young forests, scattered survivors, and ancient rocks that continue recording every passing season without judgment or haste. You realize that uncertainty is not a flaw in this story. It is part of its beauty. The Earth has revealed an astonishing amount. It has also kept a few secrets. Maybe it always will. You take one final look across the valley. The world no longer feels haunted by catastrophe alone. It feels enriched by resilience, curiosity, and the quiet understanding that every answer rests upon countless careful observations made by people willing to spend lifetimes listening to stones. The stars climb higher. The breeze grows softer, and beneath that endless sky, the greatest mystery is no longer how one world ended, but how another found the courage to begin. Section 17. The stars slowly fade as another gentle morning arrives. A soft ribbon of light appears along the eastern horizon, washing the recovering world in pale gold. Cool air settles across the valley one final time before the day's warmth begins its quiet work. Dew rests upon the young conifers while tiny droplets gather along the edges of fern leaves that have reclaimed ground once scorched by relentless heat. You breathe deeply. The air feels different now, cleaner, gentler. The overwhelming volcanic gases that once transformed the atmosphere have long begun to diminish. The eruptions that reshaped an entire planet were never meant to last forever. Even Earth's greatest geological convulsions eventually surrender to time. Nothing continues endlessly. Not destruction, not recovery, not even mountains. You begin walking through a landscape that finally feels stable. Not unchanged, stable. The rivers have settled into familiar channels. Young forests continue expanding across hillsides that only a few million years earlier struggled to support even scattered vegetation. Small animals move confidently beneath the trees, following routines that would seem wonderfully ordinary if you did not know how extraordinary their existence truly is. Normal life has returned. That may be the greatest miracle of all. Catastrophes often capture history's attention. Recovery usually happens quietly. It has no dramatic soundtrack, no single triumphant moment. Instead, recovery arrives one successful season at a time. One healthy generation, one fertile valley, one growing forest, one newborn animal surviving long enough to raise another. You pause beside a broad meadow where sunlight spills across waving grasses. A family of Lystrosaurus grazes peacefully among low plants, while nearby an agile archosaur searches carefully for insects disturbed by the larger animal's movements. The valley no longer belongs to survivors alone. It belongs to communities. Communities mark an important milestone. Ecologists understand that healthy ecosystems depend not simply upon individual species, but upon countless relationships linking plants, animals, fungi, microorganisms, water, and climate together. Recovery means rebuilding those relationships, piece by piece. The process takes astonishing patience, Researchers studying early Triassic ecosystems have found increasing evidence that biodiversity slowly expanded over millions of years rather than rebounding immediately after the extinction. New predator-prey interactions emerged, plant communities diversified, food webs gradually became more intricate, complexity returned, slowly enough that no single generation could witness the entire transformation. You continue beneath the shade of growing conifers. Sunlight filters gently through the branches, creating moving patterns across the forest floor. Small reptiles bask upon warm stones before disappearing beneath fallen logs. Insects hum steadily among patches of primitive vegetation. Everything appears comfortably ordinary, yet every ordinary moment rests upon extraordinary history. Had the Great Dying unfolded differently? Had recovery failed? None of this would exist. The thought feels strangely comforting. Life is more resilient than it first appears. Not invincible, resilient. One fascinating feature of Earth's history becomes increasingly clear as you look around. Mass extinctions erase diversity. Evolution eventually restores it, but never in exactly the same form. The world that follows always differs from the one that disappeared. Recovery is creative, not repetitive. The forests surrounding you illustrate that beautifully. These trees resemble their ancient predecessors in many ways, yet the communities they support continue changing. New ecological partnerships develop. Different animals disperse seeds. Fresh evolutionary experiments quietly unfold beneath every branch. Nature does not rebuild yesterday. It invents tomorrow. A cool breeze carries the fragrance of resin and damp soil. Somewhere nearby, water trickles over rounded stones before disappearing beneath thick vegetation. The sound blends perfectly with distant insect calls, creating the gentle rhythm that has accompanied your journey since the beginning. You stop beside a fallen tree. Its trunk has begun slowly decomposing. Tiny fungi spread across its bark while countless microscopic organisms work invisibly within the wood itself. Death continues serving life. That truth never changes. Modern forests depend just as heavily upon decomposition as growth. Fallen trees enrich soil shelter. Insects nourish. Fungi retain moisture and create homes for countless animals. Even endings contribute to beginnings. The Great Dying itself eventually became fertile ground for entirely new chapters of evolution. Scientists often refer to ecosystems as dynamic rather than static. Nothing truly remains fixed. Climate shifts. Species migrate. Continents drift. Mountains rise and erode. Even the stars above slowly change their positions over immense spans of time. Change is not the exception. It is the rule. The remarkable achievement lies not in resisting change, but in adapting to it. Far ahead, young archosaurs move confidently through open woodland. Their bodies remain modest in size, yet their movements reveal increasing efficiency. Each generation inherits small advantages shaped by millions of tiny evolutionary adjustments. No single animal notices. Evolution rarely announces itself. It whispers across generations. Only deep time hears the full conversation. Researchers continue uncovering fossils that reveal how quickly various groups diversified after the extinction. Every newly discovered skeleton helps refine our understanding of recovery, migration, anatomy, and adaptation. Sometimes one fossil changes an entire scientific hypothesis. Sometimes it simply confirms years of careful work. Both outcomes matter equally. Science advances through accumulation, not sudden certainty. The afternoon sun climbs high overhead. Warm light bathes the valley, while gentle winds ripple across open meadows where scattered vegetation now flourishes. The recovering earth appears peaceful enough that it becomes difficult to imagine the violence that once threatened nearly all life. Perhaps that is another lesson hidden within the rocks. The planet remembers, but it does not remain trapped by memory. It continues moving forward. You climb one final ridge overlooking the broad landscape. From here you can see rivers winding toward distant lowlands, forests expanding across hillsides and open plains where ancient animals continue shaping the world with every quiet step. The horizon stretches endlessly. Somewhere beyond it lies another future. Within 50 million years, dinosaurs will dominate much of the planet. Far beyond that, flowering plants will transform landscapes with colors this world has never seen. Later still, mammals will diversify into astonishing forms. Eventually, curious primates will walk upright, ask impossible questions, and learn to read the history hidden inside these very stones. None of those futures seem visible today, yet every one of them has already begun. Not through certainty, through possibility. The evening light softens once again. Golden sunlight reflects across the river, turning its surface into flowing ribbons of bronze. The breeze cools gently as the first stars prepare to return above a world that has survived its darkest chapter. You smile quietly, not because the journey is ending, because the story continues. Every forest growing around you, every cautious animal crossing the valley, every fossil waiting patiently beneath the ground. Each becomes another sentence in the longest story ever written, a story still unfolding. Even now, Section 18. Night settles gently across the earth once more. The last bands of golden light disappear beyond the western horizon, leaving behind a sky filled with familiar stars. They shine just as they did before the volcanoes awakened, before the forests withered, before the oceans lost their breath. Through every triumph and every catastrophe, the heavens have remained quietly constant, watching continents drift and life reinvent itself countless times. You stand beneath that ancient sky. The air is pleasantly cool. A soft breeze carries the fragrance of young conifers, damp soil, and fresh river water. Somewhere in the darkness, insects produce a steady chorus that rises and falls like slow breathing. The valley below rests peacefully, its scattered forests silhouetted against the silver glow of the moon. It's difficult to imagine a better place for reflection. Your journey has carried you across millions of years. You have watched a thriving world slowly unravel. You have walked through forests growing silent. You have stood beside oceans struggling to breathe. You have witnessed life reduced to only a fraction of its former abundance. And then, you watched it begin again. That simple phrase, begin again, may be one of the most extraordinary ideas in all of natural history. The Earth has never promised permanence. Instead, it demonstrates resilience. Not perfect resilience. Not effortless resilience. Patient resilience. Every recovery takes time. Sometimes unimaginably long stretches of it. You begin walking beneath the moonlight, following a narrow animal trail, winding gently between clusters of young trees. Their branches sway softly above your head, creating shifting patterns of shadow across the forest floor. Nothing feels hurried. Even time itself seems to move more slowly here. Geologists often speak of deep time, a concept that can feel almost impossible for the human mind to grasp. Our own lives unfold over decades. Civilizations rise and fall across centuries. Recorded history reaches back only a few thousand years. The events you have witnessed span millions. Each footstep carries you across intervals longer than the entire history of humanity. Yet the rocks preserve them patiently. One remarkable truth gradually becomes clear. The Great Dying was neither the first mass extinction nor the last. Earth has experienced several major extinction events throughout its long history, each transformed life in profound ways. The End-Ordovician extinction reshaped ancient seas. The late Devonian crisis altered marine ecosystems once again. The Permian extinction became the largest of them all. Later would come the Triassic extinction, and eventually 66 million years ago, another catastrophe would end the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs. Each extinction closed countless evolutionary paths. Each recovery opened entirely new ones. Researchers continue comparing these great biological crises, searching for patterns shared across hundreds of millions of years. Some involved rapid climate change. Others followed enormous volcanic eruption. Still others resulted from asteroid impacts or combinations of multiple environmental stresses. No two extinctions appear identical. Each teaches its own lesson. You pause beside a quiet stream. Moonlight reflects across its gently flowing surface, illuminating smooth stones that have rested there for ages beyond imagination. Water remains one of Earth's greatest storytellers. It carved valleys before mammals existed. It carried sediments that would later become mountains. It preserved fossils beneath layers of mud that future scientists would carefully uncover with brushes no larger than a paintbrush. The same river may change course countless times. Its story continues. Modern paleontology has become remarkably sophisticated. Researchers now combine fossil evidence with chemistry, climate modeling, computer simulations, microscopic analysis, and satellite mapping to reconstruct worlds that vanished hundreds of millions of years ago. A single grain of ancient pollen, a tiny crystal within volcanic ash, the ratio of oxygen isotopes trapped inside fossil shells. Each provides another sentence in Earth's autobiography. One fascinating question still encourages lively scientific discussion. Why do recoveries following mass extinction sometimes proceed unevenly? Some ecosystems rebound relatively quickly. Others require millions of additional years before complex communities return. The answer likely involves countless interacting factors: climate stability, available habitats, competition, evolutionary innovation, geography, pure chance. Nature rarely follows simple formulas. You continue through open woodland where the moonlight filters between slender trunks. A small archosaur crosses the path ahead before disappearing into tall vegetation. Nearby, a lystrosaurus rests peacefully beneath the shelter of low branches. These animals know nothing of extinction, nothing of geological epochs, nothing of scientific debates. They simply exist. Sometimes simplicity contains remarkable wisdom. Life does not spend its energy mourning vanished ages. It invests that energy in tomorrow. A cool wind arrives from distant hills. It carries the scent of stone still holding traces of warmth gathered during the day. You place your hand against one weathered boulder. Its surface feels reassuringly solid. Within that silent rock lies an archive spanning millions of years. Long after forests disappear, long after rivers shift, long after civilizations rise and fall, the stone remains, patiently waiting. Perhaps that explains why geology often inspires humility. The rocks remind us that our own chapter occupies only a few lines within an unimaginably long book, yet those few lines still matter, because every generation asks new questions. Every generation discovers evidence overlooked before. Knowledge grows the way forests recover. Gradually, branch by branch, discovery by discovery, the night deepens. The stars shine with extraordinary clarity above the recovering world. You recognize some familiar constellations, though their precise positions differ slightly from those visible today. Over hundreds of millions of years, even the stars slowly change their arrangement as our galaxy continues its endless journey. Nothing remains absolutely fixed. Not continents, not climates, not ecosystem, not even the heavens themselves. Only change endures. And somehow, that thought feels peaceful rather than unsettling. Perhaps because you have spent so long watching life adapt to every challenge placed before it. The Great Dying once appeared to mark the end of everything. Instead, it became the beginning of another extraordinary age. Tomorrow's forests already whisper within today's seedlings. Tomorrow's ecosystems already breathe inside today's survivors. Tomorrow's wonders always begin quietly. You take one final look across the moonlit valley. The Earth no longer appears wounded. It appears patient. Patient enough to rebuild. Patient enough to evolve. Patient enough to carry the story forward for hundreds of millions of years still to come. As the cool night breeze brushes gently across your face, you realize that history is never simply about endings. It is about continuity. The river continues flowing. The forests continue growing. The stars continue shining. And life continues finding its way. Section 19. The first light of dawn returns once again. A pale ribbon of gold slowly rises above the eastern horizon, washing the recovering world in gentle color. Mist lingers over the river, like a delicate veil, before quietly dissolving beneath the warming air. Young conifers stand silent upon the hillsides, while ferns spread beneath their branches, collecting tiny beads of dew that sparkle for only a few peaceful moments. You have almost reached the end of your journey. The landscape before you no longer feels like an unfamiliar world from an unimaginably distant past. It feels strangely familiar. Perhaps that is because the story has never truly been about strange creatures or vanished forests. It has always been about home, not your home. Earth's. Every mountain, every ocean, every living thing, all belong to the same long story. You begin climbing one final ridge overlooking the broad valley that has accompanied you through so much of this journey. The path rises gently between weathered stones softened by millions of years of wind and rain. Small reptiles bask quietly in the early sunlight before slipping into the shelter of nearby vegetation. Nothing dramatic happens. That's exactly the point. Recovery eventually becomes ordinary. There comes a moment when surviving is no longer the central challenge. Living becomes enough. As you reach the crest, the view opens in every direction. Rivers wind across fertile plains. Young forests stretch toward distant mountains. Open meadows shimmer beneath the growing warmth of the morning sun. Animals move through the landscape with quiet confidence, following ancient instincts that ask only simple questions. Where is water? Where is shelter? Where is food? Those questions have guided life for hundreds of millions of years. They continue guiding it today. One remarkable realization slowly settles into your thoughts. The Great Dying shaped every complex ecosystem that it followed. Without it, the world would almost certainly look profoundly different. The rise of dinosaurs might never have occurred in the same way. The later expansion of mammals could have followed an entirely different path. The forests familiar today might contain different dominant species. Even the evolutionary road leading eventually toward human beings would have unfolded differently, or perhaps not at all. Scientists are naturally cautious about such what-if questions. Alternative histories cannot be tested. They remain thoughtful speculation rather than established fact. Still, they remind us how profoundly a single chapter can influence everything that follows. History often turns upon moments no living witness fully understands. You kneel beside a smooth stone warmed by the rising sun. Its surface contains tiny mineral crystals reflecting the morning light. To you, it appears beautiful. To a geologist, it also contains information. Chemical composition, cooling history, age, pressure, temperature. The Earth records its memories in astonishing detail. We simply needed to learn its language. That lesson took generations. The earliest naturalists recognized fossils as clues. Later scientists connected rock layers across continents. Radiometric dating transformed our understanding of geological time. Geochemistry revealed ancient climates. Microscopes uncovered microscopic fossils invisible to the naked eye. Satellite imagery now helps identify ancient volcanic provinces stretching across enormous distances. Knowledge rarely arrives all at once. It grows, patiently, exactly like the forest surrounding you. One discovery supports another. Questions become sharper. Answers become more precise. Yet humility remains essential. Even today, researchers continue debating important details surrounding the Great Dying. Exactly how rapidly did temperatures rise? How severe were seasonal changes? Did oxygen disappear from all oceans equally? How much methane entered the atmosphere? Which environmental stress proved most lethal to different organisms? Every new fossil, every improved dating technique, every chemical analysis adds another piece to the puzzle. Science never fears saying we are still learning. That honesty is one of its greatest strengths. The breeze freshens. It carries the pleasant scent of resin and fresh water across the hillside. Insects move lazily through shafts of sunlight while distant animals continue their quiet routines below. The valley feels wonderfully alive. Not crowded, balanced. Life has found its rhythm again. One thought quietly returns. Earth itself survived. That statement may sound obvious, yet it carries remarkable meaning. The extinction transformed life upon the surface. It did not destroy the planet itself. Continents continued drifting. Mountains continued rising. Rivers continued carving valleys. The atmosphere gradually stabilized. The oceans slowly recovered. The machinery of the planet never stopped entirely. It simply entered one of its most difficult chapters. That distinction matters. Earth is resilient. Individual ecosystems can be fragile. Together they create a planet capable of astonishing renewal over immense spans of time. You continue walking along the ridge as the sun climbs higher. Far below, a herd of Lystrosaurus grazes peacefully beside the river, their silhouettes small against the vast landscape. Nearby, several early archosaurs disappear into woodland, unaware that their descendants will someday dominate continents across the globe. The future remains invisible. As it always has, no creature standing here could possibly imagine whales crossing oceans, or birds migrating between hemispheres, or flowering plants painting valleys with brilliant colors, or primates gazing through telescopes toward distant galaxies. Yet every one of those futures begins here, inside possibility, not certainty. That realization feels strangely comforting. Our own future remains unwritten as well. The afternoon light gradually softens. Long shadows stretch across the recovering forests while warm breezes ripple gently through young trees whose ancestors barely survived one of Earth's darkest ages. You look upward. Clouds drift slowly across the blue sky. The same atmosphere that once carried volcanic ash around the globe now supports gentle weather once again. The contrast is almost impossible to comprehend. Nature possesses extraordinary patience, much greater than ours. Before leaving the ridge, you turn for one final look. The Great Dying no longer appears solely as a story of unimaginable loss. It has become a story of endurance, adaptation, curiosity, hope. Not sentimental hope, the quiet kind found in rivers that continue flowing, seeds that continue growing, animals that continue raising their young. Scientists who continue asking careful questions. Hope built patiently upon evidence. The wind brushes softly across your face. The valley glows beneath the afternoon sun. Somewhere beneath those peaceful hills, ancient rocks still preserve the memory of fire, darkness, and recovery. They wait without urgency, confident that someone someday will keep listening. And perhaps that is the greatest gift the distant past offers the present. Not certainty. Perspective. Section 20. The evening has arrived once more. Golden light slowly fades from the valley as the sun slips below the distant horizon. The young forests, now fuller than when your journey began, stand quietly beneath a sky that deepens from soft blue into rich indigo. A cool breeze carries the gentle scent of resin-damp earth and fresh river water, while the steady murmur of the stream continues its endless conversation with the stones. You pause one last time. There is nowhere else to travel, only somewhere to reflect. Over these many millions of years, you have walked across one of the greatest turning points in the history of our planet. You arrived in a thriving Permian world filled with ancient forests, remarkable animals, and flourishing oceans. You watched fire emerge from deep beneath Siberia. You stood beneath skies slowly transformed by volcanic gases. You listened as forests grew quieter. You witnessed oceans lose their breath. You saw life reduced to only a fraction of what it had once been. And then, with extraordinary patience, you watched the impossible happen. Life began again. Not all at once, not through a single miraculous event, through countless ordinary moments, a seed taking root, a survivor raising its young, a river continuing to flow, a forest gradually returning, an ecosystem patiently rebuilding itself across millions of years. History often remembers dramatic endings. Nature quietly specializes in beginnings. The Great Dying remains the largest mass extinction our planet has ever experienced. Scientists estimate that around 90% of marine species and roughly 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared during this immense crisis. Entire evolutionary lineages vanished forever, leaving behind only fossils preserved within ancient rocks. Those losses reshaped the course of life in ways still being explored today. Yet extinction was never the final chapter. The survivors carried something remarkably powerful: potential. Within those modest survivors rested every future forest, every future ocean community, every dinosaur, every bird, every mammal, and eventually every human being who would look back with curiosity toward this distant age. That includes you. In a very real sense, your own existence depends upon those quiet survivors finding a way through one of Earth's darkest chapters. It is a humbling thought. Throughout this journey, the rocks have served as patient storytellers. They preserve volcanic ash, chemical fingerprints, ancient pollen, fossil shells, footprints pressed into soft mud, tiny crystals recording the age of lava flows. Together, these silent witnesses allowed generations of scientists to reconstruct a story no human eyes ever observed. The picture continues becoming clearer. At the same time, important questions remain. Exactly how rapidly did environmental conditions change? How did different ecosystems respond across distant regions? Which adaptations proved most important for survival? Every new discovery refines the story. Science is not a destination. It is an ongoing conversation between curiosity and evidence. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons hidden within deep time. Certainty is rare. Learning never ends. You look across the peaceful valley one final time. The recovering forests sway gently beneath the evening breeze. Small animals continue their quiet routines without any awareness that they stand at the beginning of an entirely new era of life. The river flows onward. The stars begin appearing overhead. Nothing seems hurried. The Earth has never rushed. Over hundreds of millions of years, continents will continue drifting. Mountain ranges will rise before slowly wearing away. New oceans where Permian-Triassic will open. Others will disappear. The descendants of today's modest archosaurs will eventually become mighty dinosaurs. Much later, after another great extinction, mammals will diversify into astonishing forms. Flowering plants will brighten landscapes with colors this world has never known. Birdsong will someday fill forests that are silent tonight. Eventually, curious human beings will walk the earth asking questions about worlds they never witnessed. Some will spend entire careers studying tiny fragments of fossil bone. Others will examine volcanic minerals beneath powerful microscopes. Some will hike across remote cliffs searching for ancient sediments. Others will use satellites orbiting high above the planet to understand events that unfolded long before humanity existed. Each contributes another sentence to Earth's remarkable autobiography. And still, the planet keeps a few secrets. Perhaps it always will. That too is comforting. A world without mystery would be a smaller one. The evening deepens. The first stars now shine clearly overhead, just as they did before the volcanoes erupted, before the forests fell silent, and before the ocean struggled to breathe. They watched the Great Dying unfold. They watched recovery begin. Tonight they watch you, not as the center of history, simply as another traveler passing briefly through an ancient and beautiful universe. Now, as your journey gently comes to an end, allow yourself to slow even further. Imagine the valley resting beneath its blanket of stars. The river continues flowing through the darkness, never hurrying, never stopping, simply following the path shaped over countless ages. The young trees sway almost imperceptibly in the cool night air. Somewhere beyond the forest, quiet animals settle into their own peaceful rhythms, unaware that they are part of one of the greatest stories ever told. Feel the cool evening breeze soften around you. Let the sounds of flowing water become slower. Let the distant insects fade into a gentle, comforting chorus. The weight of deep time asks nothing from you. It only reminds you that every ending belongs to a much larger story, and every beginning grows from what came before. The Earth has endured fire, darkness, silence, and unimaginable loss. Still, it found a way to bloom again. Perhaps there is something deeply reassuring in that quiet truth. Long after tonight, the rivers will continue flowing, the stars will continue shining, the forests will continue growing, and the story of life will continue unfolding one peaceful moment after another. As your thoughts become lighter and your breathing slower, allow this ancient world to drift gently into the distance, carrying with it the echoes of forgotten forests, quiet oceans, and the resilient survivors who unknowingly shaped every future that followed. Rest now beneath the same timeless sky. The journey is complete.